Chapter 752, Chaotic Battle. Chapter 752, Chaotic Battle. The dust dispersed and revealed the true appearance of the figure. It's Su Zimo. He's not dead. That golden lotus phenomenon that was dimmed and on the verge of dispersing was able to withstand a sword strike from a nascent soul. Didn't that mean that the golden lotus phenomenon would have been able to go against a nascent soul at its peak when it was undamaged? Everyone turned towards Su Zimo. Although his green robes were slightly tattered, he was not injured at all. On the contrary, the aura Su Zimo emitted had turned even more frightening. Everyone felt unsettled after looking at him, as though they were faced with impending danger. It was as though perfected Lord Han Yi's sword strike had released an even more terrifying existence. Initially, Dean had consumed many elixirs from his sect and was recuperating with closed eyes, trying his best to recover as quickly as possible. However, he shuddered when he sensed that aura and looked over instinctively. Instantly, his pupils constricted. It was extremely dangerous. Dean could clearly sense that Su Zimo was even more dangerous at the moment than when they fought earlier on. Perfected Lord Han Yi, you have a death wish. Su Zimo stood in their air and glared at Perfected Lord Han Yi, who was not far away, declaring with a tone that chilled one to the bones. The crowd fell into an uproar. He was provoking a nascent soul openly. Furthermore, even as a golden core, Su Zimo was on par with Perfected Lord Han Yi in terms of aura and was not disadvantaged at all. Has Su Zimo gone insane? He's trying to provoke a nascent soul even after his spirit energy has been depleted. What does it matter even if he doesn't do anything? Right now, there are 12 nascent souls that want to join forces to kill him. By the looks of things, Perfected Lord Yujun and the other two won't be able to protect him. If I were him, I'd flee as soon as possible to hide in a secluded place and wait till I leave the ancient battlefield and return to Tianhuang mainland to break through to the nascent soul realm. All the cultivators knew that the ancient battlefield was merely a dimensional fragment with limited heaven and earth powers. There's no way for Su Zimo to break through here even if he was at the peak of the Golden Core realm. The breakthrough to the nascent soul realm was a significant event. It was when a cultivator cultivated to the point where he was able to connect to heaven and earth. Even in Tianhuang mainland, a single mistake could lead to one's death, let alone right now when they were in this shattered dimensional fragment. Although he was facing 12 nascent souls, Su Zimo's eyes surged with killing intent, and there was no fear in them. He did not make use of any demonic capabilities throughout his entire battle with Dean. No techniques from the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness were used, let alone the power of his inner core. That was because he was bound by the rules of Enigma Palace and the phenomenon ranking. Su Zimo respected the rules not because of fear, but because he respected Fairy Ling Long. Now that Perfected Lord Han Yi had already broken the rules by attacking him, there was no need for him to have any reservations. Although Su Zimo's spirit energy was depleted and he could not release his golden core phenomenon for the time being, he had even more terrifying means and trump cards: his inner core, his blood chi, and his melee combat capabilities. All the nascent souls present would find themselves praying if he closed in on them. Su Zimo, retreat first. Perfected Lord Yujun said deeply with a grim expression. This is no longer a fight for the phenomenon ranking. Let me handle it. Su Zimo could tell from Perfected Lord Yujun's words that the latter was clearly trying to protect him. Before Su Zimo's thought was finished, Perfected Lord Yujun sent a voice transmission into his mind. Su Zimo, leave Myriad Phenomenon City first with the others. Enigma Palace will send the rewards for the phenomenon ranking to you. As long as they left Myriad Phenomenon City, nascent souls would be bounded by the rules of the ancient battlefield and would not be able to attack recklessly. That would ensure the lives of Su Zimo and the others at the very least. To be fair, the alliance of Perfected Lord Han Yi and 11 other nascent souls had already gone far beyond Perfected Lord Yujun's expectations. Even he was not confident that he would be able to contain the situation right now. Trying to escape? Perfected Lord Han Yi's eyes flashed. He could naturally tell what Perfected Lord Yujun was implying as he glared at Su Zimo and sneered, "Little bastard. You won't be able to leave Myriad Phenomenon City today. Ha 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 ha. Su Zimo reared his head in laughter and pointed to perfected Lord Honey with a murderous intent. Old dog, how dare you threaten me when you don't even know that you're about to die? Swash. In a flash, Su Zimo transformed into a streak of light and darted towards perfected Lord Honey at an extremely fast speed. Su Zimo had taken the first move against the alliance of 12 nascent souls. Bastard, you're courting death. You truly don't know what's good for you. Kill him. Perfected Lord Hun Yi, perfected Lord Tianming, and many other cultivators attacked in succession, locked onto Su Zimo. With that order, Su Cheng and Monk Jiankong's faction on the ground broke out into a massive fight against Little Fatty, Ming Zhen, and the others. In the blink of an eye, the skies were filled with spirit lights and Dharmic powers surged. The void seemed to have been weaved into an inescapable net made of Dharmic powers that shrouded over Su Zimo. Save him. Perfected Lord Yujun shouted and struck without hesitation. Sure. 2 flying swords streaked through the air and penetrated the gigantic web of Dharmic powers weaved by the 12 nascent souls. Frost Seal. Perfected Lord Luo Shui shouted and conjured hand seals. Her spirit consciousness fluctuated as she released a Dharmic art from Snowdrift Valley. The temperature on the battlefield dipped instantly. Layers of frost appeared on the surface of the flying swords. In fact, perfected Lord Hun Yi and the others even felt signs of their bloodlines and Dharmic powers freezing up. Go! Monk In Lu flicked his finger and a dark speck of flame drifted into the center of the battlefield. Crackle! The flame ignited and the Dharmic powers in the air burned. Together, perfected Lord Yujun, perfected Lord Luo Shui, and Monk In Lu instantly created a huge hole in the Dharmic power net weaved by the 12 nascent souls. Perfected Lord Yujun waved his sleeves, and they extended 100 feet as though they were alive. They coiled in the direction of Su Zimo and attempted to save him from the chaotic battlefield. This was a massive battle between nascent souls. An ordinary golden core would definitely die if he was drawn into the fight. Unexpectedly, Su Zimo sensed the fluctuation in the Dharmic power in the air and channeled his inner core. All of a sudden, his blood chi surged and his speed exploded as he burst away from the radius of perfected Lord Yujun's sleeves. In a flash, Su Zimo tore through the hole in the Dharmic power web and charged towards perfected Lord Han Yi. Perfected Lord Yujun froze for a moment. Before he could react, the situation in midair underwent an earth-shaking change. Su Zimo relied on the help from perfected Lord Yujun and the other 2 to break free from the obstruction of the 12 nascent souls, and he was now less than 30 feet away from perfected Lord Hun Yi. Perfected Lord Hun Yi's expression changed starkly as he fled in retreat without hesitation. At the same time, his glabella shone and his hands shifted rapidly to conjure a Dharmic seal that gathered at his fingertips. Dharmic powers converged into it relentlessly, gushing with a horrifying might. All of a sudden, a figure appeared behind perfected Lord Hun Yi. It was imperceptible under the guise of the night like a phantom. It was Night Spirit. Nobody noticed how Night Spirit entered the battlefield. By the time everyone realized, Night Spirit was behind perfected Lord Honey and had already extended his palm, thrusting it into the latter's back. Watch out! Monk Yuan Kong, perfected Lord Tianming, and the others yelled in shock. Perfected Lord Honey was a top-tier expert of the nascent soul realm after all. He reacted within a split second and Dharmic powers exploded from his robes with a bright glow. 5 Dharmic patterns. He was wearing a perfect grade defensive perfected Lord Dharmic weapon. As a top-tier expert of the nascent soul who had undergone countless battles and a perfected Lord of Chaos Essence sect, there was no way he would not possess some treasures. How could he be killed in melee range so easily? Chapter 753, Pursuit. Chapter 753, Pursuit. Bang! Night Spirit thrust his palm into perfected Lord Hun Yi's back. The glow of the perfect grade perfected Lord Dao robe flickered momentarily before dimming. The Dao robe caved in deeply and perfected Lord Hun Yi shuddered. Blood drained from his face as he staggered to the front. Even the Dharmic art that had yet to form in his hand was dispersed by the attack. Nobody understood the shock perfected Lord Hun-E experienced at that moment. It was lucky that he wore a perfect-grade perfected Lord Dao robe. If it was any other supreme-grade Dharmic weapon, his organs might have been ruptured by Night Spirit's attack. That sort of power was way too terrifying. Perfected Lord Hun-E did not dare to linger at all and fled into the distance. He had the perfect-grade perfected Lord Dao robe with him. As long as he could hold out for a couple of breaths, perfected Lord Tianming and the others would be able to step in and rescue him. However, although he was fast, Su Zimo was faster. Hand over your life. Su Zimo shouted and released Divine Steed Fleeting, gliding through the voids before arriving instantly behind perfected Lord Hun-E. He reached out and flung his arm in the direction of perfected Lord Hun-Ye's head. His arm coiled and trembled around perfected Lord Hun-Ye's head like the trunk of a divine elephant. Snap! Right in front of countless gazes, perfected Lord Hun-Ye's head spun a few times around his own neck and his spine was completely snapped. Rumble! A bloodied head that was completely mangled fell to the ground. The burst power of that attack ruptured perfected Lord Hun-Ye's brains completely, and his essence spirit did not even have the chance to escape. Perfected Lord Hun-E was dead. The chaotic battle on the surface paused for a brief moment. Nobody expected the battle to be this tragic, such that a nascent soul died right after the commencement of the fight. Furthermore, he died to a golden core. The number 1 perfected being. This was the true number 1 perfected being. That was the courage and capabilities befitting someone at the top of the phenomenon ranking. Within the crowd of the battle royale, Dean heaved a deep breath of air, and a resolute look flashed through his eyes. Without hesitation, he bolted in a flash to escape Myriad Phenomenon City. He had fled. Given the current circumstances, the number 1 of the previous phenomenon ranking chose to escape. The cultivators that noticed what he did sighed with emotional looks on their faces. At the same time, all of them could empathize with Dean. Su Zimo was way too strong. Even a nascent soul was killed by him. Dean had no choice but to avoid Su Zimo. As long as he survived, given his talent and potential, he could rise again after advancing to the nascent soul realm. At that time, he could challenge Su Zimo again and might have a shot at winning. Both on the ground and in midair, the golden cores and nascent souls were fighting in a chaotic mess. Dian's movements were nothing special, and he did not attract the attention of many people. However, Su Zimo noticed him. He had kept his eyes on Dian's activity right from the beginning without relaxing at all. In his heart, Dian was a greater threat than perfected Lord Tianming and the others. If he missed this opportunity, it would be too difficult to kill Dian once they returned to Tianhuang mainland with the protection of a massive faction such as Chaos Essence Sect. Su Zimo made his decision the moment he thought about that. Night Spirit, stay here and take care of Xiaoning and the others. I'll go and kill Dian. Su Zimo left that statement and burst forward in a flash, charging in the direction where Dian disappeared. Trying to run? Leave the Purple Thunder manual behind. Perfected Lord Tianming, Perfected Lord Bei Do, and the others stood out in succession to block him. Naturally, there was no way Perfected Lord Yujun, Perfected Lord Luo Shui, and Monking Lu were going to stand by idly as they released many Dharmic arts and secret skills to defend against most of the attacks. Monk Wei Fu managed to break free from Monking Lu and appeared in front of Su Zimo in a flash. Ba. He let out a long Buddhist proclamation and extended his palm, gripping it into a fist. Blood chi surged and his arm shone with a blinding light as though it was covered with a layer of gold. Boom! He threw a punch out. Dharmic powers surged and the voids trembled. Monk Wei Fu had a burning gaze as he glared into Su Zimo's eyes, shouting, "Demon, where do you think you're going?" With that, Monk Wei Fu released 2 secret skills and a Dharmic art of Diamond Monastery. The secret skills were none other than the Enraged Diamond Gaze and Lion Roar. The Dharmic art was Monk Wei Fu's punch. Known as the Diamond Fiend Suppression Punch, it was the ultimate technique that supported Diamond Monastery. Every single punch contained a ton of power and could subdue evil and fiends, as though one was imbued with diamond. However, Monk Wei Fu's visual technique could not affect Su Zimo at all. Su Zimo cultivated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness regularly and was superior to Monk Wei Fu in terms of visual prowess. Furthermore, Su Zimo cultivated illumination eye daily with an unwavering resolve. The enraged diamond gaze could not push him back at all. Get lost. Su Zimo was in a rush to catch up to Diin and did not wish to be stopped here as he released a tremendous roar. It was the secret skill, Thunderclap Kill. The power of his lungs was way too strong. The roar engulfed Monk Wei Fu's lion roar instantly like a sudden thunderbolt. Su Zimo's eyes shone ferociously as he faced Monk Wei Fu's incoming golden fist. Without dodging or avoiding, he charged forward and threw his leg ahead. A gigantic ravine seemed to have formed in the air. Using Plow Heaven's stride as a foundation, Su Zimo threw out a punch as well, channeling his inner core to gather his blood chi towards his fist. Everything burst forth the moment he clashed against Monk Wei Fu. Boom! There was a deafening sound. Their surroundings seemed to have frozen. The next moment, a figure was repelled and nearly fell from the skies. Monk Wei Fu had a frightfully pale face, and the robes on his arm were shredded into pieces. His flesh split apart with a series of frightening bloody rips. Pissed. A perfected lord of Diamond Monastery that specialized in body tempering was sent flying by a single punch from Su Zimo. To think that Su Zimo's melee combat strength would be this terrifying. Su Zimo did not pause at all as he tore through countless obstacles and continued his pursuit for Diin. Diin sped the entire way. When he heard the commotion, he turned around instinctively and caught sight of Su Zimo, who was sprinting towards him. Lunatic! He cursed as he conjured hand seals and channeled spirit energy. 5 elements escape. Fight streams of lights with a myriad of colors shone from Diin's body, and his speed exploded, as though he was in resonance with heaven and earth. Su Zimo narrowed his gaze and slapped his storage bag, grabbing a handful of elixirs to stuff into his mouth. The elixirs in his storage bag were all at perfect grade. The moment they entered his tummy, the elixirs were converted into rumbling spirit energy that cruised through his limbs before converging in his dantian. Su Zimo was invigorated, and a pair of gigantic wings spread behind him. Ethereal wings. Coupled with Su Zimo's blood chi and the burst of his body, a green streak of light bolted by at a terrifying speed when he flapped his wings. The 2 monster incarnates rushed out of Myriad Phenomenon City one after another. The one at the front was running for his life. All his attention was focused on his pursuer. Neither of them noticed that not far away from Myriad Phenomenon City, a group of cultivators was approaching slowly. There were around 100 cultivators, and all of them were tall and muscular. All of them wore black robes that concealed their appearances beneath a dark hood as they emanated malevolent auras. Is this the Myriad Phenomenon City of the human race? The black-robed man that led the group paused in his tracks and raised his head slowly to gaze at the majestic ancient city before him. Suddenly, he laughed sinisterly. We're finally here. Chapter 754, Change in Myriad Phenomenon City. Chapter 754, Change in Myriad Phenomenon City. Commander, hurry, look over there. A black-robed cultivator pointed to the east of Myriad Phenomenon City, where 2 figures were sprinting away from Myriad Phenomenon City, one after the other. They arrived from the south, so they did not encounter the 2 figures. The black-robed cultivator said deeply, "The man at the back has a pair of wings. That seems like a secret skill that was created by imitating our bloodline. Commander, please permit me to kill the 2 of them." Another black-robed cultivator said murderously, "They are sullying our bloodline by trying to imitate it. They deserve to die." The black-robed man that led them turned his head slightly, and 2 cold glints flashed from the depths of his dark hood. "Go and return quickly. The rest of you, follow me into Myriad Phenomenon City. The Paragons of the human race are all gathered here. They must have a lot of treasures with them, and we can defeat them all at the same time. I heard that the god race has entered the ancient battlefield this time round as well. We can't let them get ahead of us. Understood. The black-robed cultivator bowed and was about to chase after the two figures in the east. The black-robed man mulled and said, "Be careful. Judging from their speed, those two should be top-tier paragons of the human race. Don't underestimate them and end up dying." "Don't worry, Commander." The black-robed cultivator smirked. "Humans have a weak innate bloodline. No matter how much effort they spend cultivating, they are no match for us." "All right, go on." The black-robed man nodded. The black-robed cultivator transformed into a dark streak of light in a flash and disappeared from the spot. His speed was frightening. Myriad Phenomenon City. Although Su Zimo and Di'in had already left, Perfected Lord Hun Yi's death caused the chaotic battle to spiral out of control completely. Under Niehao's lead, Chaos Essence Sect, along with Su Chong of Zephyr Thunder Palace and monk Jiankong of Hollow Monastery, released a bombardment of ferocious attacks against Little Fatty, Shijian, Ji Chengtian, Night Spirit, Monkey, and the others. There were many paragons from the Immortal and Buddhist sects, and they surrounded Little Fatty and the others right in the middle. It was lucky that Thousand Crane Sect and Elixir Yang Sect were on their side because of Long Ro, Ji Chengtian, and Xiaoning. Otherwise, they would have been drowned by the thousands of paragons on the opposing end. Talismans filled the skies and flying swords streaked everywhere. Among them, the 6 demon beasts, Monkey, the Spirit, Ching Ching, Night Spirit, Little Fox, and the Golden Lion went on a massacre and burst forth with terrifying combat strength. Monkey, the Spirit Tiger, and the Golden Lion rammed through the crowd, and not many cultivators could stand in their way. Some of them merely suffered light injuries such as snapped tendons and broken bones, but others died on the spot. Ching Ching reverted to her true form and flapped her gigantic wings, spiraling in midair with sharp fangs and claws. Little Fox released her fox charming techniques and gazed at weak-willed cultivators, bewitching them instantly to create chaos in the crowd. Night Spirit was the most frightening among them. Like a phantom, he shuttled through the crowd. His feet barely touched the ground, and there was barely anyone who could even touch his clothes. Everywhere his shadow passed by, paragons died. The true uproar happened when Su Cheng, who was number 4 on the phenomenon ranking, found his head separated from his body in less than 10 moves against Night Spirit. His golden core phenomenon, the apocalyptic 5 thunders, was shattered by 3 punches from Night Spirit. The battle turned increasingly tragic and bloody as it dragged on. There were cultivators from both factions injured or dead. It was difficult to end a massive battle as such the moment it started. In midair, Perfected Lord Tianming, Perfected Lord Bei Do, and the others tried to stop Night Spirit countless times when they saw cultivators from their factions dying to him. However, Perfected Lord Yujun, Perfected Lord Luo Shui, and Monk In Lu managed to hold them back. Yujun. Perfected Lord Tianming narrowed his gaze and shouted murderously. Perfected Lord Tianming died from an ambush of the demon race, and cultivators from the Immortal and Buddhist sects are being murdered by those beasts as well. Yet, you're trying to stop us from stepping in to kill them? Perfected Lord Hun Yi deserved to die. Perfected Lord Luo Shui sneered. As someone from an immortal sect and a nascent soul, he ambushed a golden core. He deserved to die 100 times over. Ba. Monk In Lu frowned, as well as he said deeply, "This battle started from your end. Do you expect them to surrender obediently and die in your hands without a fight?" Perfected Lord Yujun declared loudly, "Tianming, Beidou, lay down the orders to stop and leave everything else for me to settle. Do you guys really wish to see Myriad Phenomenon City turn into rivers of blood and have mountains of corpses built in front of the Myriad Phenomenon Peak?" "Stop?" Perfected Lord Tianming laughed menacingly. "We'll talk about stopping after the group of them and their beasts pay with their lives." Haha. The Perfected Lord of Overlord Palace, who was watching by the sidelines, clapped and said gloatingly, "Fight! Fight! All of you from the Immortal and Buddhist sects love to preach about your self-righteousness. Yet, you guys look nothing more than disgusting and pathetic right now." Perfected Lord Chuyu of Azura sect was watching coldly by the sidelines with crossed arms as well. However, he frowned slightly. Hee. Right then, a sinister laughter sounded, and it actually overwhelmed the chaotic noises of the massive battle and echoed in every single corner of Myriad Phenomenon City. Puny ants indeed. The voice was erratic and sounded as though it came from everywhere. Its origin could not be determined. Even the perfected lord of Overlord Palace knitted his brows tightly with an indeterminate expression. His glabella shone as he spread his spirit consciousness all around in a continuous search. Perfected Lord Chuyu of Azura sect seemed to have detected something as he spun around and gazed to the south. On the long street in the south, a group of black-robed cultivators approached. There were around 100 of them, and they were all unusually bulky and tall. They were even taller than 10 feet. Although they wore black robes and their appearances could not be seen, it was clear from their figures that they were not humans. Chuyu shuddered when his spirit consciousness made contact with the group of them, and he retracted it immediately. What a strong malevolent chi! His spirit consciousness was almost tainted by the malevolent chi the moment it made contact with the group of cultivators, and his essence spirit was almost injured. The perfected lord of Overlord Palace had a slightly grim look. Clearly, he had also noticed the strangeness of the group of black-robed cultivators. The nascent souls that were fighting in the air had no intention of stopping. All of them merely glanced over casually without paying much attention. Perfected Lord Yujun was the only one who seemed to recall something as his pupils constricted. That's the thing about humans. You love to fight among yourselves. The black-robed man in the lead approached and stopped in his tracks. In my opinion, humans will cause themselves to go extinct sooner or later even without any catastrophes or calamities. Who is there? The perfected lord of Overlord Palace questioned loudly. Who? The black-robed man sneered. Do you think you're worthy to know? Insolent. Brazen. Who is this coward who is hiding his face? The cultivators of Overlord Palace did not partake in the chaotic battle. One of them could not hold himself back and arrived before the black-robed cultivator in a flash. He brought out a spear and thrust forward instantly. The spear streaked through the air and buzzed. It was clear how powerful the attack was. The black-robed man in the lead did not move at all. Behind him, a black-robed cultivator flickered and bolted forward in a flash. His black robes covered everything as he dragged the cultivator along with the spear into them instantly. In the blink of an eye, the black-robed cultivator reappeared on where he was. It was as though he had never moved. However, the cultivator of Overlord Palace was gone. Before everyone could recover from their surprise, a series of weird sounds came from beneath the cultivator's black robes. Crack, crack, rip, rip. It was as though someone was biting off the flesh and chewing on the bones. Pissed. Many cultivators had goosebumps all over their bodies. Chapter 755, Rakshasa Race. Chapter 755, Rakshasa Race. A thick blood stench emanated out. One after another, lumps of flesh fell beside the feet of the black-robed cultivator. A golden core of Overlord Palace was eaten alive by that black-robed cultivator. Any cultivator that could arrive in Myriad Phenomenon City had witnessed deaths and have killed others as well. However, they were still shocked nevertheless when they witnessed a cultivator eaten alive mouthful by mouthful. Some of the female cultivators turned pale and their tummies churned. Unable to control themselves, they vomited on the spot. Night Spirit, who was initially in a massacre in the battlefield, suddenly stopped as though he sensed something. His ears twitched as he sniffed in the air, and his expression changed. In a flash, he disappeared into the crowd and vanished. Brother Zhao, the fiend heir of Overlord Palace, Pengyu, was enraged when he saw that as he let out a tragic cry. Without a second word, he brought forth a spear and charged towards the black-robed cultivator on the other end. He, another person who wishes to die. A black-robed cultivator in the crowd laughed and moved. Leave this one for me to eat. The moment he said that, he vanished from the spot. Pang Yu felt his vision blur as though a shadow passed by. Not good, he lamented internally. It was too fast. That speed was much faster than he could see with his eyes. Swoosh! It was as though someone was blowing at the back of his neck. A chilling intent rose from the bottom of his feet, and his hairs stood on end. Pang Yu did not hesitate and released his golden core phenomenon right away. Boom! The power of phenomenon churned in midair. Spirit energy circled Pang Yu continuously and converged rapidly to form a terrifying, pitch-black spear. The spear crackled with lightning and quivered slightly. Even the voids cried in its presence. Overlord Palace's legacy phenomenon, heavenly thrusting spear. Too late. The moment Pang Yu released his golden core phenomenon, two words sounded in his ears with a hint of mockery, playfulness, and killing intent. Immediately, he felt a chill down his throat. It was a chill that he could not be more familiar with. It was the coldness of a sword's blade. In less than a single breath, an outcome between their fight was decided. Right in front of many cultivators, Pang Yu charged forward and the black-robed cultivator vanished. The moment Pang Yu released his golden core phenomenon, a phantom-like shadow appeared behind him, gripping a cold, curved saber and swinging it towards his throat. A paragon who was on the top 10 of the phenomenon ranking could not survive a single attack from the black-robed cultivator. Just as everyone thought that Pang Yu's head was going to be severed from his body, a series of spear shadows streaked through the air densely towards the black-robed cultivator at an extremely fast speed. The spear shadows possessed a wisp of heaven and earth's might. It was a Dharmic art. The nascent souls had attacked. Many cultivators turned over. The perfected lord of Overlord Palace glared deeply at the group of black-robed cultivators with a grim expression. He shuffled his fingers to create hand seals, and the Dharmic power in his body surged. He was the one that produced the dense spear shadows. Damn it! The black-robed cultivator who was initially behind Pang Yu shrieked, and his black robes suddenly tore apart, falling through the air in pieces. The true appearance of the black-robed cultivator was fully exposed. He was extremely tall with black skin and a pair of jet-black meat wings on his back. They were full spread and were dozens of feet wide. The black-robed cultivator looked extremely ugly with a green face and bared fangs. His nose was pointed to the skies and his fingers and toes had sharp, curved nails that shimmered coldly. That was no human. It resembled a malevolent ghost from hell. The green-faced malevolent ghost sensed the pressure behind him and could not pierce Pang Yu's throat in time. He revealed his true form and flapped his wings, transforming into a dark streak of light. Sure. The streak of light was extremely fast and surpassed the sensory reactions of every cultivator present. He shuttled through the dense spear shadows with unusual nimbleness and dodged through everything before reappearing behind the black-robed man. The crowd was shocked. On the one hand, they were shocked at the repulsive and ugly appearance of the creature. On the other hand, they were shocked at his capabilities. There was no Dharmic power fluctuation from the green-faced malevolent ghost. In other words, he was only at Golden Core realm at the very most. However, he was able to escape fully unscathed from a nascent soul's killing move by relying on his terrifying speed, and he was only a Golden Core. Pang Yu felt his limbs go cold. Although he managed to survive, his heart palpitated and had not calmed down. A thin bloodline appeared on his throat. If the perfected lord of Overlord Palace was a single step slower, he would have been a corpse. You have a death wish. The moment the green-faced malevolent ghost returned to the crowd, the black-robed man at the lead suddenly released a loud roar and his black robes exploded as well. He had the most muscular body among the black-robed cultivators, and his black meat wings produced a shuddering malevolent chi. Swoosh! The black-robed man vanished. You guys are... The eyes of Overlord Palace's perfected lord constricted violently. He had just raised his spear, and his mouth was slightly agape after saying 3 words when he came to an abrupt stop. It was as though time froze. Right in front of many cultivators, the black-robed man vanished. By the time he reappeared, he was already behind the perfected lord of Overlord Palace, and his wings were retracted. The black-robed man wielded two extremely curved sabers that were etched with complicated, ancient patterns in each hand. Drip, drip. Grisly blood droplets fell slowly one after another from the sharp blades. Rumble. The head of Overlord Palace's perfected lord slid down from his neck and rolled a few times on the ground. The eyes of the bloodied head were wide open, as though they experienced immense shock up till his death. The perfected lord of Overlord Palace was dead. He could not survive a single attack from the black-robed man. Many cultivators watched the scene unfold squarely, and their minds went blank. Everything had happened way too quickly and suddenly. Pang Yu's gaze froze. Before he could even rejoice over his survival, his sect's senior who stood in to save him was already dead. The nascent souls who were initially fighting to their deaths in midair came to a stop in unison. Perfected Lord Yujun, Perfected Lord Beidou, Perfected Lord Tianming, Monk In Lu and the others had grim expressions as they stared at the creatures with green faces and bared fangs on the long street. There was a deep cautiousness in the depths of their eyes. In fact, it was fear. The chaotic battle on the ground came to a stop as well. Even a fool could tell that the green-faced beings with bared fangs were hostile. Initially, the massive Myriad phenomenon city was filled with clamor and murderous yells. In the blink of an eye, it was dead silent. A blood stench wafted through the air with a murderous intent. Night Spirit was hidden among the crowd. He glared at the green-faced beings with bared fangs. Although his eyes surged with killing intent, they deepened as he retracted his aura and tried his best to conceal his gaze so that the opposing faction would not notice. Little Fatty stood right beside Lin Xuanji and could clearly detect the minute actions coming from the latter. Lin Xuanji's hands behind his back were trembling slightly. "Brother Lin, what's their background?" Little Fatty whispered. With an ashen expression, Lin Xuanji gulped before replying slowly, "One of the primordial 9 races, the Rakshasa race." Chapter 756, Giving Up Without a Fight. Chapter 756, Giving Up Without a Fight. Little Fatty and the others were shaken by what they heard. Instantly, the stories and legends of the primordial 9 races surged into their minds. Legend has it that in the primordial era, there were 10,000 races that stood dominant. Among them, 9 of them reigned supreme, and they were later known as the primordial 9 races. The 9 races reigned above the 10,000 races, and their status was unshakable. Bloodlines, legacy memories, secret skills and cultivation techniques that were passed down from the 9 races were way too strong and could suppress the 10,000 races. Unlike humans who were innately weak, the 9 races were incomparably strong from birth. Even without cultivating, they were strong enough to dominate the 10,000 races, let alone humans who were oppressed right at the bottom as slaves. In the eyes of the primordial 9 races, humans were even cheaper than ants. A legendary war broke out in the primordial era that exterminated countless races with bones laid everywhere and rivers of blood. Because of that, the primordial 9 races was severely injured as well. Otherwise, the human race would not have had any chance to rise. In the ancient war thereafter, humans secured a tragic victory. The primordial 9 races were severely injured and scattered all around Tianhuang mainland to live ignobly. Those were later on known as the 9 Forbidden Grounds. Be it seniors from Immortal, Buddhist of Fiend sects, they would always instruct their disciples to never ever step foot into the 9 Forbidden Grounds. Even during the golden era of the human race where multiple emperors rose and a legendary talent, such as the human emperor, was born, the primordial 9 races could not be wiped out entirely. That was enough to show the terror of their foundation. For most cultivators, their knowledge of the primordial 9 races only came from some sparse descriptions in ancient books or from brief descriptions from seniors of their sections. It was said that even the most ordinary existence in the bloodline of the primordial 9 races could easily kill anyone else from the other races of the same cultivation realm, humans included. For the primordial 9 races, the strongest among them with the purest bloodlines could even kill cultivators who were in major cultivation realms above them. Those were originally merely legends. But now, it is turned into a bloody truth. The most muscular Rakshasa was clearly one of those with strong bloodlines. Although he was at the Golden Core realm, his movement techniques were extremely swift, such that even nascent souls could not react to him. In midair, perfected Lord Tianming, perfected Lord Beidou, and the others had grim expressions. If they were in the position of Overlord Palace's perfected lord, they would have died as well. Sigh, we did not manage to avoid this in the end. Perfected Lord Yujun gave a long sigh and revealed a deep look of worry in his eyes. The reason why the phenomenon ranking was pushed forward for more than a month this time round was because he had caught wind of news that clansmen from the primordial 9 races had entered the ancient battlefield. After the ancient war, clansmen from the primordial 9 races rarely appeared in Tianhuang mainland. However, each time they did, there would be a bloodbath. 10,000 years ago, an earth-shaking catastrophe was even created that resulted in the annihilation of 2 super sects and a great empire that lasted for 10,000 years. This time round, perfected Lord Yujun received news that one of the primordial 9 races, the God race, had appeared in the ancient battlefield. The God race definitely had a motive for entering the ancient battlefield, but he did not know exactly what it was. However, in order to avoid any clashes with them, perfected Lord Yujun chose to push the fight for the phenomenon ranking forward. To think that they could not avoid it eventually. Furthermore, judging from the current situation, the circumstances were worse than he had imagined. The Rakshasa race had already entered Myriad Phenomenon City before the God race appeared. They waged a massacre the moment they attacked. They were hostile. The Rakshasa race was the most violent among the primordial 9 races. With meat wings behind their backs, they were extremely swift and ate people. Furthermore, they loved to consume flesh and bones. Among the Rakshasa race, the men were extremely hideous with dark skin, red hair, green eyes, and faces with bared fangs. They looked absolutely terrifying. However, the women were beautiful, charming, and looked no different from humans. The Rakshasa race also possessed the fastest speed among the primordial 9 races. Perfected Lord Yujun glared at the tallest and most muscular Rakshasa leader before asking deeply, "Why has the Rakshasa race visited Myriad Phenomenon City that belongs to our human race? We're naturally here to eat some humans." The Rakshasa leader laughed sinisterly and revealed a pair of bloodied and sharp fangs. Ow, ow. The Rakshasa clansmen behind him became extremely excited and peeled off their black robes. Each of them spread their black meat wings and revealed their true appearances, smacking their lips as though they wanted to charge forward immediately. Perfected Lord Yujun's face flashed with rage before slowly calming down. However, perfected Lord Tianming, perfected Lord Beidou, and the others had shimmering gazes as they glanced out of Myriad Phenomenon City from time to time in deep thoughts. Perfected Lord Yujun said coldly, "Everyone of the Rakshasa race, Myriad Phenomenon City is a sacred place for the human race, and there are more than 100,000 human paragons gathered here right now. There's only slightly more than 100 of you. If we truly break out into a fight, how many of you can manage to scrape out alive?" His tone was murderous and robust. As the successor of Enigma Palace, no matter how cautious he was in his heart, he could not retreat. Furthermore, there were many paragons of the human race in Myriad Phenomenon City. If they banded together, they would be a force to reckon with, and the 100-odd Rakshasa clansmen might not be able to win. Human paragons? The Rakshasa leader extended a grisly red tongue and smacked his lips before snickering. "I love to eat the flesh and drink the blood of paragons." The moment he said that, his figure vanished. The expressions of perfected Lord Yujun and the others changed starkly. Immediately after, the Rakshasa leader's voice sounded. It was erratic, and his exact location could not be determined, but his voice spread through the entire Myriad Phenomenon City. "There's so much fresh meat here. Kill them." More than 100 Rakshasa clansmen soared into the air and transformed into streaks of dark light that bolted into the crowd for a massacre. "How dare you!" Perfected Lord Yujun was enraged and summoned his destiny flying sword immediately. It hovered in front of his chest as he shouted, "Everyone, don't panic. As long as we stick together." Before he could finish his sentence, he was interrupted by another voice. Cultivators of Zephyr Thunder Palace, heed my orders and swiftly follow me to leave Myriad Phenomenon City. Perfected Lord Tianming's voice sounded and lightning crackled around him as winds howled. He had released his sect's secret skill, Zephyr Thunder Escape, to flee out of Myriad Phenomenon City. Cultivators of Heavenly Dipper Sect, heed my orders. All of you, get out of this place. Perfected Lord Bei Do's figure flashed as he fled out of Myriad Phenomenon City with a panicked expression without hesitation. Immediately after, monks Yuan Kong and Wei Fu pumped down similar orders. There were more than a dozen nascent souls, but in the blink of an eye, half of them chose to flee without fighting. The many golden cores present were undecided in their flusters to begin with. When they heard the voices, many cultivators fled away from Myriad Phenomenon City instinctively. Instantly, the long street was in chaos. There were screams and tragic cries. You guys! Perfected Lord Yu Jun's eyes were widened as chills ran down his body. Initially, their only shot at survival was if they joined forces and let go of bygones to stand together against the Rakshasa race. But now, Zephyr Thunder Palace, Heavenly Dipper Sect, Hollow Monastery, and some other sects chose to escape without fighting. That was equivalent to them giving up their final opportunity. Escape? Perfected Lord Luo Shui gave a bitter chuckle. Who will be able to escape? Even Zephyr Thunder Palace's unparalleled escape technique can't compare to the speed of the Rakshasa race. How foolish! Monkey Lu sighed helplessly. Perfected Lord Yu Jun gazed at the chaotic long street and fleeing cultivators with a sense of turmoil as tears welled in his eyes. All of those paragons were going to turn into the prey of the Rakshasa race, and there would be no survivors left. Chapter 757. Shifting Tides. Chapter 757. Shifting Tides. Perfected Lord Tianming released Zephyr Thunder Escape and Dharmic powers surged. Like a thunderbolt, he sprinted away from Myriad Phenomenon City without stopping. In fact, he was not even bothered about the disciples in his sect. Perfected Lord Tianming was not a sealer in his twilight years. He was a nascent soul that was in his prime. There was no way he was going to sacrifice his life to protect the disciples of his sect. His expression was panicked with a deep hint of fear in his eyes. He did not make the decision out of a moment of foolishness. It was a decisive choice judging from the situation. The Primordial Nine Races was way too terrifying. His fear towards the Primordial Nine Races was already rooted and stemmed from the depths of his bloodline. There was no way to resist it. It was the same way how a mortal would feel fearful upon encountering a ferocious beast even without fighting it. Furthermore, Perfected Lord Tianming knew that he was no match for the Rakshasa leader after witnessing the latter's terrifying capabilities. If he lingered in Myriad Phenomenon City, he would definitely die. Right now, they might have a shot at survival if they chose to escape. In truth, Perfected Lord Tianming was not the only one. Even Perfected Lord Beidou, Monk Yuan Kong, and most of the other Perfected Lords had the same thoughts. Myriad Phenomenon City was in chaos. Figures danced in midair one after another. Sinister laughters echoed through the entire city. The Rakshasa clansmen bared their mouths and revealed bloodied fangs as they gazed at the cultivators scurrying in escape. Their gazes were fervent as though they were looking at a delicious feast. Poof! A purple firmament sect cultivator had barely moved when he found his chest punctured by a dark light, causing fresh blood to spurt. The person's gaze froze and gradually dimmed. His body paused momentarily before exploding suddenly. He died right on the spot. A nun from Clear Heart Nunnery was overcast by a shadow the moment she soared into the air. Before she could release her golden core phenomenon, she nearly fainted from a sharp pain in her abdomen. Instinctively, she looked down. She saw a bloodied claw protruding from her abdomen wielding a round golden core in its palm. Her head slanted to the side and she fainted. Hee. The Rakshasa clansman tore out her golden core and tossed it into his mouth, swallowing it. Immediately after, he dug out the nun's heart and stuffed it into his mouth as well, chewing it with blood splashing everywhere. Similar scenes were repeated elsewhere constantly. Although they were all at Golden Core realm, human Paragons could not withstand a single attack against a Rakshasa clansman. Even ordinary Golden Core phenomenons were shattered with ease by the Rakshasa race. Only Paragons on the phenomenon ranking could hold out briefly when they released their Golden Core phenomenons. However, the Rakshasa race specialized in speed and movement techniques. The Paragons of the phenomenon ranking could only struggle and defend upon release of their Golden Core phenomenons. Once the power of their phenomenon was depleted, they would be nothing more than fish on a chopping board. More than 100 Rakshasa clansmen shuttled through the crowd wildly wielding sabers in their hands. Blood and corpse was left in the wake of everywhere they passed. The streams of dark light were like scythes of the reaper that collected the lives of human Paragons. There were more than 100,000 cultivators fleeing in all directions. Little Fatty and the others were gathered together, and their small group had yet to attract the attention of the Rakshasa race. What should we do? Little Fatty's forehead was filled with sweat as he asked softly. The group of them was gathered purely because of Suzimo. Now that he wasn't around, none of them had any plans. They had various expressions and different thoughts. What's there to be afraid of? Monkey's eyes were bright and bloodshot as he glared at the Rakshasa dark lights that streaked through the air one after another. With a fierce gaze, he said in a chilling voice, "We'll just kill the hell out of them no matter what race they are." Heis. Ji Chengtian sighed. While that may be the case, the Rakshasa race is simply way too terrifying. Although he had a pained expression when he looked at cultivators in the city dying one after another with their heads severed, he felt a sense of helplessness. Xiaoning pursed her lips tightly and was about to tear up. Even with Long Ro's cold personality, her heart wrenched at the sight of her fellow sect mates from Thousand Cranes sect dying, and she had a bitter expression. The spirit tiger gulped and his eyes shone as he whispered, "Brother Monkey, the Rakshasa race has yet to provoke us. Let's avoid their brutality for the time being." Lin Xuanji sighed at the sight of this. Even within their group, everyone had varied opinions, let alone 100,000 cultivators that came from all over Tianhuang mainland from different sects and factions. It was completely unrealistic for the 100,000 cultivators to band together. Their cohesiveness was gone. It was going to be difficult for the human Paragons to escape from today's calamity. Notwithstanding Little Fatty and the others, even the demon beasts on Suzimo's side such as Little Fox, Ching Ching, the Golden Lion, and the Spirit Tiger were flustered with fear in their eyes. Monkey was the only one with a prideful gaze and sustained ferocity. Night Spirit was expressionless as he followed behind everyone with a cool gaze. Nobody could read his thoughts. "Night Spirit, what do you think?" Monkey turned to ask. "We'll take advantage of the chaos to escape." Night Spirit spoke with a deep voice. "If we get into a fight, it'll be difficult for us to escape unscathed." Monkey calmed down and gathered his thoughts. Even if he was confident in his unparalleled combat strength, he would only be able to take on up to 2 Rakshasa clansmen at best. The group of them merely consisted of slightly more than 10 people. However, there were more than 100 from the Rakshasa race. Furthermore, there was an even more terrifying Rakshasa leader who could kill nascent souls. If a fight were to break out, the majority of them would not be able to avoid the slaughter of the Rakshasa race. Let's flee from Myriad Phenomenon City first. The tides are no longer on our side. Right then, Lin Xuanji's voice sounded with a hint of fatigue and exasperation. Since they had a decision, the group of them no longer hesitated. "Let's leave too." Monkey beckoned, and the group of them followed the crowd to flee out of Myriad Phenomenon City. In midair, perfected Lord Tianming sprinted the entire way with lightning speed. Hot on his tails was a sword light that traveled at an extremely fast speed. "Yuhua, get lost." Perfected Lord Tianming caught sight of the sword light from the corner of his eyes, and his expression changed as he hollered. The sword light was Perfected Lord Yuhua from Sword Sect who had released Sword Escape. Perfected Lord Tianming knew that if 2 nascent souls were gathered together, they would become a greater target and attract the attention of the Rakshasa race more easily. "Why don't you scram further instead?" Perfected Lord Yuhua was not willing to relent and rebutted instead. Before his sentence was finished, both Perfected Lord Tianming and Perfected Lord Yuhua felt a chill down their spines. An evil gust of wind blew, and a dark light tore through the air. It was too fast. The Rakshasa leader had actually caught up to them in a flash. Perfected Lord Yuhua was fully focused on escaping and reacted a tad too late. A blood light flashed, and the next moment, his head was severed from his body. A tiny man that glowed flew out of Perfected Lord Yuhua's glabella with a flustered expression. After leaving the body, it trembled all over, clearly unable to withstand the killing intent and blood lust shrouding around Myriad Phenomenon City. The essence spirits of nascent souls were way too fragile. The moment the essence spirit of a perfected lord leaves his body, it is extremely susceptible to irrecoverable damage and might even die. However, at that moment, Perfected Lord Yuhua could not afford that many considerations. Yet, the moment his essence spirit escaped, it was gripped by a pitch-black muscular palm. Caw caw. The Rakshasa leader's laughter sounded. I've yet to experience the taste of a perfected lord's essence spirit. I'll savor it today. He stuffed Perfected Lord Yuhua's essence spirit into his mouth and crushed it within a few chomps. Perfected Lord Tianming felt chills run down his spine at the sight of that. His limbs went cold, and he almost fell from midair. Chapter 758, Arrival of the God Race. Chapter 758, Arrival of the God Race. The Rakshasa leader consumed Perfected Lord Yuhua's essence spirit and shifted his gaze towards Perfected Lord Tianming, who was not far away. He snickered and revealed a row of blood-stained and menacing fangs. It's over. Perfected Lord Tianming was devastated and had even given up on resisting entirely. How dare you, outsider race? Prepare to die. A series of deafening yells sounded from midair. It was Perfected Lord Yujun, Perfected Lord Luo Shui, and Monk In Lu who had arrived just in time. They struck at the same time without hesitation and released the strongest secret skills of their sex. Instantly, Dharmic powers surged and the weather changed. The Rakshasa leader could sense the terror of the power, although Perfected Lord Yujun and the others were behind him. While the Rakshasa race was one of the primordial 9 races and he could kill nascent souls who were a major cultivation realm above him, it did not mean that his power was enough for him to take on nascent souls head-on. Furthermore, this was an attack from 3 top-tier perfected lords of Tianhuang mainland. However, the Rakshasa race's advantage was not in terms of strength, but in speed. They can shuttle through the air at an unfathomable speed. His movement technique was something that even nascent souls would have difficulty capturing. The Rakshasa leader scoffed coldly and chose not to fight Perfected Lord Yujun and the other 2 head-on. In a flash, he transformed into a dark streak of light and vanished from the spot, delving into the voids. Perfected Lord Yujun and the other 2 were relieved when they saw the Rakshasa leader escape. Tianming, this Rakshasa leader is definitely not our match in terms of strength. Perfected Lord Yujun looked towards Perfected Lord Tianming, who was still in a daze not far away. As long as we join forces and create a circular formation, we might be able to kill that Rakshasa leader. That's right. Monk In Lu nodded as well. That Rakshasa earlier did not dare to fight us head-on. This is our only chance. Perfected Lord Tianming gradually returned to his senses and realized that the reason he survived was due to the arrival of Perfected Lord Yujun and the other 2. However, there was no fighting spirit at all in his eyes. He was scared out of his wits. He knew that Perfected Lord Yujun's words made sense. However, they could not react to the Rakshasa leader's speed at all. What were their chances of winning even if they worked together? Perfected Lord Tianming did not wish to die. He wanted to get out of this place. Get out of Myriad Phenomenon City. Get out of this hell as soon as possible. You guys can work together if you want to. Don't include me. Perfected Lord Tianming's expression changed and mulled for a moment. A determined look flashed through his eyes as he left that declaration before sprinting away without turning back. You! Perfected Lord Yujun was so furious that his arms trembled. Monk Lu had a disappointed look in the depths of his eyes as he sighed. Everyone is only concerned about themselves, but at a moment as such, who can stand by idly? The three of you are the ones who want to join forces to kill me. Suddenly, a sinister laughter sounded beside their ears with a chilling intent. Not good. Perfected Lord Yujun and the other two felt chills run down their spines. A cold glint shone with the aura of death as it descended from above Monk Lu's head, prepared to cleave him into two. Hurry, retreat. Perfected Lord Yujun released a burst of power and jerked Monk Lu away. A blood light flashed. An arm was flung into the air with blood spraying everywhere. Although Monk Lu managed to survive, Perfected Lord Yujun lost an arm and blood spewed from his wound. Perfected Lord Luo Shui rendered assistance hurriedly and shielded Perfected Lord Yujun. With a wave of her hand, she laid down layers of ice crystals that reflected different light rays to distort one's vision, blocking the Rakshasa leader for the time being. Perfected Lord Yujun's face was extremely pale. The weapons of the Rakshasa race possessed an extremely evil type of power. They rendered injuries with unstoppable blood flows. After losing an arm, his blood chi was severely depleted and his combat strength was almost non-existent by now. Furthermore, the injury was serious and almost irrecoverable. Regeneration of limbs was only available at the conjoint body realm. However, the path of cultivation was arduous and treacherous. It was unknown whether he could even cultivate to the void reversion realm, let alone the Dharmic characteristic and conjoint body realms later on. Perfected Lord Luo Shui rescued Perfected Lord Yujun, but the Rakshasa leader did not continue his pursuit of them. A dark light flashed. Monk Lu's reaction was delayed because he was worried about Perfected Lord Yujun's wounds. Instantly, a massive cut appeared across his abdomen and his organs nearly spilled out. Ugh! He grunted deeply. Monk Lu knew that the Rakshasa leader had not gone all out. Otherwise, he would have been a corpse by now. Hee hee hee. Sinister laughter echoed through the air erratically. A moment ago, it was at the front. The next moment, it appeared behind Perfected Lord Luo Shui's back. Watch out! Perfected Lord Yujun shouted to remind her, but he was still too late. A half-foot-long cut sliced down from the top of Perfected Lord's back. Any deeper, and she would have been split into two. Due to the pain and immense loss of blood, Perfected Lord Luo Shui could no longer control her body as she fell from midair along with Perfected Lord Yujun and Monk Lu. The three of them smashed to the ground in a wretched state, stained with blood and mud as their faces turned increasingly pale. Yes, delicious. In midair, the Rakshasa leader held Perfected Lord Yujun's arm and was chewing off its flesh, chomping down in huge mouthfuls. Perfected Lord Luo Shui felt her stomach churn at the sight of it and nearly vomited. Perfected Lord Yujun's body shook in rage and flames of anger spewed from his eyes. He was grinding his teeth so badly they were almost crushed. The life essence from your flesh is even richer and rarer. I'll keep your lives for now. If I kill all of you now, your flesh won't remain fresh. Hee hee. The Rakshasa leader laughed menacingly. Right then, as though he sensed something, he spun around furiously and glared towards the west. 8 figures streaked through the air from the west of Myriad Phenomenon City. There were men as well as women. The men were handsome and the women were gorgeous. Among them, a woman's hands and legs were bound and she looked fatigued. However, the other 7 of them glowed with a faint light. Perfected Lord Yujun and the other 2 turned around instinctively as well. In midair, 4 nascent souls were speeding towards the west. One of them was Monk Wei Fu from Diamond Monastery, and the other was Monk Jin Kong from Hollow Monastery. The other 2 people were the Perfected Lords of Purple Firmament Sect and Clear Wind Temple. The 4 nascent souls encountered the incoming 8 figures. Scram! Monk Wei Fu was busy trying to escape and could not be bothered with the 4 people before him. He shouted and his blood chi churned to release the Buddhist sect's Lion Roar and Diamond Fiend Suppression Fist right away. Fu. The leader of the 8 people was a man with golden hair and blue eyes. He was extremely tall and handsome with a deep gaze. As he looked at the incoming monk Wei Fu, he merely smiled faintly. The golden-haired man did not avoid or dodge and charged forward instead. "Get the hell back." His blood chi churned and gave off a golden glow. As his bloodline channeled, there were even sounds of tsunami. It was as though a golden ocean was hidden within his body. The golden-haired man extended his arms similarly and threw out a punch as well. Bang! The two fists collided. Time seemed to have frozen. Monk Wei Fu looked like he was in endless pain, and the sound of bones cracking could be heard from his arm. Poof! He spat out a mouthful of fresh blood, and his gaze dimmed as he fell from midair. His arm was ruptured. Pissed. The cultivators that were fleeing were scared out of their wits when they saw that. The god race is here as well. Perfected Lord Yujun's eyes were filled with despair as he lamented tragically, "Are our human paragons truly going to endure such a calamity in Myriad Phenomenon City?" Chapter 759, Rivers of Blood, Catastrophe of Paragons. Chapter 759, Rivers of Blood, Catastrophe of Paragons. The god race was one of the primordial 9 races, but they were unlike the Rakshasa race. If the Rakshasa race was well known for their speed, the god race would be feared for their bloodline. The bloodline of the god race was not red, but golden. Beings of the god race possessed extremely frightening power of blood chi, physique, and melee combat capabilities. Monk Wei Fu of Diamond Monastery specialized in body tempering. However, he could not endure a single blow from the leader of the god race, and his arm was ruptured by a single punch. Thereafter, the god race leader caught up to him with a couple of steps and stomped his body into pieces, destroying his essence spirit in the process. If even Monk Wei Fu could not win in melee combat, there was no hope for the other nascent souls. The god race had a noble bloodline and proclaimed themselves to be the god of all 10,000 races back in the primordial era. Their lifespans were in union with heaven and earth, and they shared the brilliance of day and night. Their bloodlines were similar to the spirit chi of heaven and earth, and they could manipulate spirit chi and Dharmic powers with ease. Beings of the god race were adept in learning spirit arts and secret skills. Not only that, the power of the skills would be amplified when it was released by them. The Rakshasa leader did not dare to take on the human nascent souls head-on and could only rely on his movement techniques and speed. However, the strength of the god race leader was enough to suppress human nascent souls head-on. The descent of the god race was absolutely devastating for the humans who were struggling to survive from Myriad Phenomenon City. The god race leader's sudden attack caused golden blood chi to shroud around him. As though he was encircled by a golden ocean, he shone brilliantly like a divine being. "Nobody is allowed to leave without my permission." Although his tone was calm, it was unquestionable. The golden hair of the god race leader danced and his eyes shone brightly. He single-handedly held back Monk Yuan Kong and the perfected lords of Purple Firmament Sect and Clear Wind Temple. Even as a golden core, he was strong enough to fight against 3 nascent souls. That was the terror of the god race. Among the remaining 6 clansmen of the god race, one of them suppressed the woman with her hands and legs bound personally. The other 5 charged into the group of human paragons who were fleeing and killed on a whim. Galaxy Vortex. The paragon of Heavenly Dipper Sect saw that the city gate was right before him and knew that he could escape from Myriad Phenomenon City the moment he rushed through it. He gathered his courage and released his golden core phenomenon to welcome the attacks. Insignificant strength. Break. The god race clansman opposite him did not avoid or dodge, and his eyes were filled with deep disdain. With a smirk, he reached out and punched the countless stars before him. Boom! The sky of stars dispersed. The phenomenon vanished. Galaxy Vortex was ranked 12th for the phenomenon ranking this time round, but now it was shattered by a bare-handed punch from a god race clansman. That terrifying blood chi, horrifying physique, and frightening strength was absolutely unstoppable. There was no way to fight against it. It happened at almost the same time. All the other golden core phenomenons of the human paragons were shattered by the god race clansman. Phenomenon ranking? Paragons? You're nothing but a bunch of jokes. A group of ants who are merely deceiving themselves. The clansmen of the god race reared their heads in wanton laughter. Rintu, who was third on the phenomenon ranking, released his corpse mountain Bloodsea and managed to defend against a god race clansman. However, the god race clansman's attack caused his golden core phenomenon to sway with a dim glow, as though it could dissipate at any moment. Rintu had a terrible expression and was forced to retreat continuously. It was only a matter of time before he was defeated. In midair, among the 3 perfected lords that were fighting against the god race leader, 2 of them were already dead. Monk Yuan Kong, who was remaining, was also at the end of the road. Within a few attacks, the god race leader caught hold of an opening and punched him in the chest. Monk Yuan Kong's heart exploded as he fell to the ground with fresh blood flowing out of his mouth. He died on the spot. The god race leader stood in the air and blocked the path of escape to the west of Myriad Phenomenon City. He had a divine might and no cultivator dared to advance at all. The dense crowd of human paragons had just surged forward when they began to retreat, only to find themselves killed by a dark light streaking through the air at the back. The eyes of the Rakshasa leader shifted towards the god race leader as he smirked coldly before saying in an odd manner, "The god race sure got here early. We're both the same." The god race leader replied indifferently, but he did not stop in his massacre. Poof! Perfected Lord Beido's head was ruptured by a single punch from the god race leader, and his essence spirit was destroyed. Another nascent soul was dead. Myriad Phenomenon City resembled the purgatory with corpses strewn all over and rivers of blood. The human paragons were experiencing an unprecedented catastrophe. It wasn't that there were no humans that resisted as everything happened. However, against the terrifying combat strength of the Rakshasa and god race, the cultivators did not manage to create much of an impact before being suppressed. They either became cold corpses on the ground, or food in the bellies of the Rakshasa race. Of the 17 nascent souls, only Perfected Lord Yujun, Perfected Lord Luo Shui, Monk Yin Lu, Perfected Lord Chuyu of Azura Sect, and the Perfected Lords of Soaring Feather Sect and Wisdom Monastery were left. Furthermore, all 6 of them were severely injured and sat on the ground crippled. They could not do anything but watch with despaired gazes. "Sinner. I'm a sinner." Perfected Lord Yujun struggled and stood up quivering, as though he had grown significantly older within an instant. When he saw the human paragons slaughtered in the hands of the Rakshasa and god race clansmen like fish on a chopping board, it felt as though his heart was being sliced apart. This was Myriad Phenomenon City, a sacred ground for the human race. In the ancient era, the golden era with the birth of the human emperor alongside multiple emperors, how could any other race dare to step foot into the city? The ancient phenomenon steel was here. There were marks left here by countless predecessors. In fact, the shadows of the ancient emperors existed here. Yet, after countless years, although they were similarly beneath the foot of the Myriad Phenomenon peak in the same old ancient city, human paragons were being slaughtered helplessly by other races. I've let down Fairy Ling long. I've let down the predecessors of the human race. Perfected Lord Yujun's face was frightfully pale due to immense blood loss as he knelt on the ground and kowtowed repeatedly towards the ancient phenomenon steel with a sorrowful expression. Heis. Monk Yin Lu sighed. Although Buddhism believed in the concepts of karma and reincarnation such that he no longer had many attachments towards life and death, he felt his heart wrench at the moment as well. May the heavens take pity on us. Past emperors, if you're able to see this with your spirits, the human paragons are undergoing a catastrophe. Can anyone save them? Perfected Lord Luo Shui was dispirited as she gazed at the gray, hazy skies above her. 2 clear streams of tears flowed from the corners of her eyes, turning into crystals instantly as she murmured softly. The arrogant laughter of the Rakshasa and god race echoed throughout Myriad Phenomenon City in a piercing manner. However, countless human paragons could only howl helplessly in a heart-wrenching manner. Regardless of gender, immortals, or fiends, at that moment, the lives of the human paragons were cheaply and mercilessly reaped by the Rakshasa and god race. Their blood flowed for thousands of miles, and their miserable cries could be heard everywhere. In the blink of an eye, there were only less than 80,000 human paragons left from the initial 100,000. That figure was even decreasing rapidly at the moment. The remaining cultivators fled wildly in panic as they yelled with fearful faces. Some of them even gave up on escaping and knelt outright on the ground, begging the heavens to spare them. Myriad Phenomenon City had been relegated to an endless hell. Chapter 760, Protection Dharmic Weapon. Chapter 760, Protection Dharmic Weapon. Perfected Lord Tianming sprinted the entire way and was drenched in sweat. Part of the reason was because he had exerted his dharmic powers to their limits. Another part of the reason was because he broke out in cold sweat due to the excessive shock he received. Myriad Phenomenon City was already far behind him. Perfected Lord Yujun, Monking Lu, and Perfected Lord Luo Shui stepped in and rescued him from the Rakshasa leader. Coupled with the arrival of the god race, he managed to take advantage of the chaos to escape from the city. Even then, he did not dare to stop or turn back as he fled far away, afraid that the Rakshasa leader would catch up to him. Perfected Lord Tianming sprinted a little more, and the only sounds he could hear was the howling winds and his own panting. It was only then that he gradually came to a stop and turned back with a sense of trepidation. At the end of his vision was Myriad Phenomenon City, which was now a black spot the size of a palm. However, he could clearly see blood chi surging into the skies around the black spot, disrupting the firmaments. The arrival of the Rakshasa and god race in Myriad Phenomenon City was an extreme catastrophe, and probably less than a tenth of the cultivators would be able to escape. At the very least, the strength of Tianhuang Mainland's cultivation world would be immensely crippled for the next 100 years. Su Zimo sure is lucky that he managed to leave earlier by coincidence, allowing him to avoid this catastrophe. Perfected Lord Tianming remarked spitefully, "If he was in Myriad Phenomenon City, I could have killed him with the help of the Rakshasa and god race, and that will be a huge problem resolved." He stood in midair with an indeterminate expression and deep thought. A moment later, Perfected Lord Tianming's eyes flashed with a firm look, as though he had decided on something. In a flash, he vanished from the spot. Dean had a dark expression. He fled the entire time after leaving Myriad Phenomenon City, but Su Zimo was like a shadow hot on his tails. No matter how many cultivation techniques and secret skills he released, he could not shrug the latter off. The distance between them closed up instead. Dian's spirit energy was almost depleted. He could not sustain his immense expenditure, although he was consuming elixirs continuously. He believed that Su Zimo was definitely not in a great state either. Even so, the lunatic behind him did not have any intention of stopping, and a chilling intent could be sensed piercing his back. What a lunatic! Dean cursed internally. His legs were almost completely numb, and he felt a giddy sensation in his head. If he continued running, he would die of fatigue before Su Zimo caught up to him. As a peerless monster incarnate, Dean was prideful and would naturally not beg for mercy. Furthermore, he knew that the situation between them was irreconcilable. If their positions were exchanged, he would not let Su Zimo off either. He once declared that not only was he going to kill Su Zimo, he was going to kill everyone close to him down to the very last person. In truth, that was also the exact reason why Su Zimo was bent on killing Dean. Kill. When he realized that he could not escape, Dean spun around and brought out the Great Qian Imperial Seal, smashing it down fiercely onto Su Zimo's face. In fact, his spirit energy was depleted so badly that he could not activate the spirit patterns on the Imperial Seal. Even so, the Great Qian Imperial Seal was indestructible and would be able to smash Su Zimo into sludge as long as sufficient strength was exerted. Humph! Although Su Zimo was hot in pursuit, his spirit perception warned him the moment Dean made a sudden move. As such, he was prepared. The futile struggle of a trapped beast. Su Zimo wielded the coiling dragon seal and demonic chi shrouded him as he yelled, "Dean, your spirit energy has been depleted and you have no more techniques left." However, I can still kill you even without spirit energy. Clang. The sound of metal clashing was released the moment the Great Qian Imperial Seal and Coiling Dragon Seal clashed. It was extremely sharp and sparks flew everywhere. Ugh! Dean grunted dully, and his palm split apart. He could no longer maintain his grip on the Great Qian Imperial Seal, and it flew from his hands. 10 years ago, Dean and Su Zimo were evenly matched in the fight at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley. 10 years later, Dean was no longer a match for Su Zimo. Dean could not win even with the legacy of the human emperor. How did this man manage to cultivate his blood qi and body to such a frightening degree? Yin's palms quivered as he tapped on the ground and burst in retreat. Boom! Su Zimo landed on the ground and burst forward like a divine steed, releasing a tragic aura. He wielded the coiling dragon seal with his right hand like an ancient demon with a torrential ferocity, while his left hand scooped through the air to grab the falling Great Qian Imperial Seal. Die! He arrived before Dean almost in the blink of an eye. The two gigantic seals covered the skies like two massive mountains that possessed a boundless might as they crashed down onto Dean's head. Dean would be ruptured to death if that attack landed, even if had a connate defensive spirit weapon. When he realized that it was too late to dodge, Dean yanked down a jade pendant that hung on his waist and crushed it without hesitation. Buzz! A resplendent glow was released and condensed into a light barrier around Dean, protecting the latter inside. Boom! The two gigantic seals smashed heavily against the light barrier at the same time. Dean was sent flying right away and only stopped after rolling on the ground for more than 100 feet. That's a protection Dharmic weapon? Su Zimo focused his gaze. A protection Dharmic weapon, such as a jade pendant, was exceptionally rare in the cultivation world because it could be carried around easily. These were items that were prepared by super sects or mighty figure Daolords for the people closest to them. Dean was the #1 perfected being of Tianhuang mainland and was a monster incarnate that dominated through everyone of the same cultivation realm. It was no surprise that he would carry a protection Dharmic weapon as such. He struggled to stand from the ground, and his pupils constricted violently when he glanced at the light barrier around him. The glow of the light barrier had dimmed significantly. However, what truly shocked him was that a crack appeared on the light barrier. Although it was thin, he could see it clearly. The protection Dharmic weapon could even defend against the full-powered attack of a top-tier nascent soul. In other words, the presence of the protection Dharmic weapon, along with his frightening combat strength, meant that he would not be in any danger at all within the ancient battlefield. To think that a single attack from Su Zimo would cause a crack in the light barrier. Even the protection Dharmic weapon won't be able to protect you. Su Zimo had a cold gaze and charged towards Dean in huge strides. Do the heavens truly want me to die? Dean glared at the incoming Su Zimo with a snarling expression, and his eyes were filled with indignance. All of a sudden, a mocking voice sounded in midair. Fufu, these two ants are sure in a rather intense fight. The voice was erratic and sounded distant, yet close at the same time. There was no way to determine its origin. Su Zimo narrowed his eyes and shifted his gaze. Electricity crackled through his eyes as he spotted a dark light that shuttled through the air not far away. The dark light stopped and revealed its true appearance. The intruder was tall and bulky with a dark complexion. He had red hair, green eyes, and a green face that was hideous, while a gigantic pair of meat wings flapped gently behind his back. Those two gigantic seals are decent. I want them both. The intruder looked down with an arrogant expression and stared at Su Zimo and Dean as though he was looking at two dead men. This seems to be... Su Zimo furrowed his brows slightly. Dean glared at the intruder and frowned deeply. Suddenly, his expression changed as though he recalled something as he yelled, Rakshasa race. Indeed. Su Zimo's gaze turned cold. In the ancient books at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley, he had read partial descriptions of the primordial 9 races. Dean's remark further verified his guess. Chapter 761. Escape. Chapter 761, Escape. Upon the arrival of the Rakshasa race, Di Yin's eyes first flashed with shock. Thereafter, he gradually realized something and was delighted. The heavens are on my side. Dean was way too smart and realized before long that this might be his only shot at escaping. Suzumo did not have much of an impression towards the primordial 9 races. After all, that was an era long forgotten. In Suzumo's opinion, there were good, bad, kind, and evil people from every race. That was the case even among the human race. However, the Rakshasa before him targeted his Great Qian Imperial Seal and Coiling Dragon Seal from the get-go. That ignited Suzumo's killing intent. It was clear that this intruder was hostile and wanted to kill for his treasure. Suzumo was expressionless and put the Great Qian Imperial Seal and Coiling Dragon Seal away in his storage bag. You have a death wish. The Rakshasa in midair was enraged when he saw what Suzumo did. He smirked coldly and revealed blood-stained fangs as he declared with a cold voice. Suddenly, Dean spoke and said darkly, Suzumo, let's stop fighting and escape to survive respectively. Escape? Suzumo shook his head. Be it up in heaven or down in hell, there's nowhere left for you to run. Fufu, the Rakshasa race has already arrived, and you can't even guarantee that you can get out alive. Yet, you want to kill me? Dean laughed coldly. Additionally, even if you can survive, can you guarantee the same for your friends back in Myriad Phenomenon City? Suzumo's heart sank. In truth, the moment the Rakshasa appeared, he thought about how many of them there were. If this was not the only one, where were the other Rakshasas? The god race that abducted Nian Qi had not shown themselves as well. Where were they now? Could the appearance of the Rakshasa and god race in the ancient battlefield be the reason why the phenomenon ranking was brought forward this time round? Uneasy thoughts bubbled in Suzumo's mind. Suzumo, I'd advise you to hurry back to Myriad Phenomenon City as soon as possible to check up on your friends and spirit beasts. You might be able to salvage their corpses if you get back earlier. Dean said as he retreated. Suzumo's expression darkened instantly, and a furious glint flickered through his eyes. He strode forward and said coldly, I'll make sure I kill you before I return. How dare the two of you ants ignore me? The Rakshasa in midair widened his eyes and shrieked, feeling as though his dignity had been challenged severely. There was no way he knew that the two people before him were the top 2 of the phenomenon ranking. They could be considered as the strongest paragons of this generation and rare monster incarnates of history. Even Di Yin's first reaction upon seeing the Rakshasa was not to escape, let alone Suzumo. Dean believed that if he was in peak condition, he was definitely strong enough to defeat this Rakshasa before him. What truly threatened Dean was Suzumo still. Dean retreated rapidly while Suzumo chased hot on his heels. The two monster incarnates ignored the Rakshasa completely. Sure, a dark streak of light tore through the air. Before it arrived, Suzumo already felt his scalp prickling. The Rakshasa had attacked. He was furious that Suzumo ignored him and put away the Great Qian Imperial Seal and Coiling Dragon Seal. As such, his first target was Suzumo. How fast? Suzumo's heart skipped a beat. Even if he was in peak condition, he might not be able to reach that level. However, Suzumo cultivated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness and possessed the ability of precognition. The cicada senses autumn coming before the wind even starts to blow. His body flattened, and he was almost stuck to the ground like an anaconda. While he dodged the dark light, he slithered through the grass in Di Yin's direction without a decrease in speed. In Di Yin's view, Suzumo had vanished from sight and was hidden in the grass. Click, clack, click. The grass swayed, as though an ancient anaconda was slithering through it with a ferocious aura. Pissed. Di Yin's expression changed, and he felt his scalp prickle. Without hesitation, he punched in reverse violently. Suzumo's body suddenly turned soft against that incomparably tough attack. He propped both arms onto Di Yin's body and wrapped around him. He released Anaconda Coil right after avoiding Di Yin's punch. Di Yin was petrified and hissing sounds echoed beside his ears, as though a massive wind box was being pulled constantly. It was Suzumo opening his mouth to breathe in. Suzumo's body expanded at a visible speed and blood chi surged as he released a terrifying pressure to constrict Di Yin's body continuously. That was a killing move from the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. The number one perfected being of the North region, Shi Wuya of Glass Palace, died in Suzumo's hands from this technique as well. Today, Suzumo was going to murder the once number one perfected being of Tianhuang mainland using Anaconda Coil as well. Crack, crack, crack. A jarring sound echoed from the light barrier around Diin, and it flickered as though it could shatter at any moment. There was no way he would be able to defend against the constrictive power if the light barrier shattered. All of a sudden, a cold glint flashed and sliced towards the throat. This was a rare opportunity to kill Diin, and there might not be another chance as such if this was missed. Although he sensed the danger, Suzumo's body continued wrapping around Di Yin's body while exerting strength. At the same time, he struck towards the cold glint with his left hand. "You must have a death wish." The voice of the Rakshasa sounded. Clang. A metallic sound could be heard. The cold glint froze and revealed its appearance. It was a chilling saber that curved with a shocking degree. Right now, Suzumo grabbed the curved saber in his palm. However, his palm was perfectly fine without any wound at all. Suzumo's left hand was equipped with the Khanate-grade spirit glove he obtained from the Glass Palace Paragons and would naturally not get injured. The Rakshasa was momentarily stunned. However, he broke out of his stupor instantly and sliced again with a cold gi towards Suzumo's throat at an extremely fast speed. With no other choice, Suzumo withdrew Blood Quencher with the back of his hand and slashed forward. Clang! The blades of the sabers collided. The Rakshsa's body shuddered, and a look of shock flashed through his eyes. The strength of this human cultivator was boundless like the ocean and impossible to defend against. Although it was merely a single slash, he could already feel his arms go numb and his curved saber nearly flew from his hands. Impossible. Humans are innately weak with a cheap bloodline. They're the most inferior ants around. How can there be a cultivator as such? I can't fight against him in terms of strength. In a flash, the thought crossed the Rakshsa's mind, and he stopped underestimating his opponent. In the blink of an eye, he appeared behind Suzumo. His movement technique was absolutely unfathomable. In order to defend against the Rakshasa, Suzumo had to free both hands. However, he could no longer restrain Diin with just his arms and waist. Herg! Diin grunted deeply, and the sound of bones cracking echoed from within his body as his tendons and bones sounded together. Suddenly, his body shrank and he seized the opportunity to escape from Suzumo's coil. Fu-fu-fu. Diin sprinted into the distance and laughed sinisterly. Suzumo, we'll meet again in the future. I'll definitely take my revenge during our next encounter. What a pity. Suzumo looked at Di Yin's fleeing figure and lamented internally. He was entangled by the Rakshasa and could not afford to continue his pursuit of Di Yin. Furthermore, he was indeed worried about Myriad Phenomenon City. There was no way to determine how much more time he had to spend if things with Di Yin continued to drag out. I've got to kill this Rakshasa and hurry back. At that thought, Suzumo shrugged his wrist and Blood Quencher buzzed loudly with an immense blood chi. Suzumo caressed the blade gently and said with a murderous tone, "Brother, today, I'll let you know what the blood of a Rakshasa tastes like." Chapter 762, Killing a Rakshasa. Chapter 762, Killing a Rakshasa. An unusual fluctuation appeared in the void behind. Suzumo did not even turn back and released a slash with an icy gaze. Splash! The sound of tsunami surged and a blood beam expanded. The sound of metal clashing did not echo as expected as the slash missed. The Rakshasa had already dodged a moment earlier and was at Suzumo's side. Huh! The Rakshasa exclaimed softly with a mocking, cruel tone. To think that you've cultivated to the tsunami blood realm. Not bad. Your flesh must be exceptionally delicious. Dreaming of eating my flesh? You truly don't know what's good for you. Suzimo sneered. "Aunt, I think even at this point, you've yet to notice who your opponent truly is." The Rakshasa shrieked, "I'm from the noblest race of the primordial era, the Rakshasa race of the primordial 9 races. We once ruled over the 10,000 races, and ants such as yourself were not even worthy of carrying my shoes." With his agile movement technique, the Rakshasa circled around Suzimo continuously, appearing left and right, distant and near. His movement technique was unpredictable like a phantom. Suzimo changed his saber technique continuously, tough and resolute for a moment and soft and fluid for another. However, the Rakshasa refused to fight him head-on and separated at every single touch. "Hee hee, Aunt, you can't even touch my sleeves." The Rakshasa laughed gleefully. Suzimo stood on the spot and frowned slightly. If he was in his peak condition, he could definitely match the speed of the Rakshasa by channeling his golden core and inner core at the same time to release his blood chi and a burst of his body. However, his spirit energy was almost entirely depleted after his massive battle and pursuit of Diin. He truly could not catch up to the Rakshasa with just his inner core, blood chi, and burst of his body. "I don't mind telling you something else." The Rakshasa harumphed coldly. "The spirit wings that you cultivated was a secret skill created after you humans observed the movement techniques of our Rakshasa race. Heh, unfortunately, humans are way too stupid to comprehend even a fraction of the obscurity of our Rakshasa race's movement technique. The bloodline of the human race is way too cheap, and you guys are innately impossibly weak. There's no way you can control the secret skill of our Rakshasa race with ease." It was true that Ethereal Wings was inspired from the Rakshasa race. Unfortunately, humans and Rakshasas were two different races at the end of the day. The structure of a Rakshasa's body and even their bloodline had evolved after a long time. Coupled with their wings, they had almost zero resistance when they flew in the air. However, humans had a distinctly different body from the Rakshasas. Naturally, Ethereal Wings could not attain the same speed of the Rakshasa race as well. Suzimo's face was calm as water, and he thrust Blood Quencher into the ground. His arms slumped naturally and his eyes were half shut. He could not be bothered to converse with the Rakshasa. He was trying his best to empty his mind and maintain a state of clarity. You want to wear me out?" The voice of the Rakshasa sounded once more. "I travel through the air just like how you humans walk on the ground. I don't feel fatigue at all. Aunt, you can't wear me out." Suzimo remained silent. The Rakshasa was biding his time to search for an opportunity to strike. It was the same for Suzimo. One of them was active, and the other was passive. Although they did not have any physical contact, both of them were filled with killing intent that once burst would definitely result in the death of either one. The Rakshasa was extremely careful and did not charge recklessly. He merely tested the waters continuously. However, Suzimo was immobile like an old monk in meditation. "I heard that you've got some friends back in Myriad Phenomenon City." After a short stalemate, the Rakshasa suddenly spoke. "Let me remind you that those friends of yours should have become food for our Rakshasa race by now." "Ha ha ha." The Rakshasa laughed cockily. "There's more than 100 from our race that entered the ancient battlefield this time round. Myriad Phenomenon City, a sacred haven for the human race, will become a slaughter field for our Rakshasa race." Suzimo's arm quivered slightly, as though he was dealt a grave shock mentally. It was an opening that was hard to detect. However, the Rakshasa's eyes were extremely sharp and instantly recognized it as a rare opportunity to strike. The killing intent in his eyes intensified, and he charged towards Suzimo in a flash. The opening lasted for a brief glimpse at the very most. However, in a fight between top-tier experts, especially a Rakshasa with that terrifying speed, the brief glimpse was all that was required. A glimpse would decide victory or even life and death. All of a sudden, between his swaying black hair, Suzimo's eyes jolted open with a glaring glint and a hint of mockery. Not good. The Rakshasa was alarmed when he saw the look on Suzimo's face. He must have revealed that opening intentionally. "I've been tricked." It was too late by the time the Rakshasa realized it. That glimpse was also enough for Suzumo. The Rakshasa channeled his bloodline and forcibly switched directions. He adjusted his angle of motion and fled into the air at an extremely fast speed. His reaction time was the absolute fastest. The Rakshasa believed that even if Suzumo was prepared, he would not be harmed. However, his expression changed starkly the next moment when he saw what happened from the corner of his eye. Suzumo did not chase and merely stood motionlessly on the spot. Unknowingly, a gigantic moon-colored bow that shone with 6 spirit patterns had appeared in his hands. He pinched a dark gold-colored arrow with 2 fingers, and it shone with 6 spirit lights as well. The moon concealment bow and black gold arrow, 2 connate spirit weapons. After the battle at the Great Qin Ruins in the North region, Suzumo was down to a last black gold arrow. Right now, he was ready to launch the arrow in his palm at any moment. Buzz! Bow like a full moon and arrows like shooting stars. By the time the Rakshasa heard the buzzing sound of the bowstring, the black gold arrow was already close to him. Although Suzumo could not match the Rakshasa with his movement technique, the burst of his 2 connate spirit weapons could. The Rakshasa was rather impressive as well. Even with his passive position, he managed an evasive maneuver and avoided fatal damage to his vitals. The black gold arrow tore through the Rakshasa's meat wing and created a hole of blood the size of a bowl. Those were not any ordinary bow or arrow. Those were connate spirit weapons. Although it seemed like it was merely a hole of blood, the power within it was enough to cripple one of the Rakshasa's meat wings completely. The flesh of the wing exploded and his tendons and bones were snapped. Ah! The Rakshasa yelled miserably. Suzumo did not stop at all after firing the arrow, as he withdrew blood quencher that was embedded into the ground. He stomped and soared into the air with a boom. His motion was fluid as water, and the Rakshasa had no time to react at all. Slash! He released a thunderous roar that sounded almost at the same time as the Rakshasa's yells. A blood beam expanded and slashed down viciously along the Rakshasa's body, seemingly able to rip through the void. The Rakshasa with half his wings crippled was like a bird with snapped wings. After losing the greatest advantage of the Rakshasa race, the Rakshasa was on the verge of falling. He could barely stabilize himself, let alone dodge Suzumo's lethal slash. Blood spewed and sprayed from midair. The tall and bulky body of the Rakshasa was cleaved into 2 in the middle by blood quencher, and his organs splattered down with a retching stench. The top half of the Rakshasa fell onto the ground, and his eyes dimmed. He was not dead yet as blood flowed out from his mouth. He glared at Suzumo with eyes that resembled a dead fish and stuttered. YUW will definitely die here. And my leader W will take our revenge for me. Die in peace. I'll slay your Rakshasa leader together so that he can accompany you in hell. Suzumo strode forward and ruptured the Rakshasa's head with a stomp. Chapter 763, Darkest Chapter. Chapter 763, Darkest Chapter. The duration of their fight could be considered as extremely short. However, no one outside the fight could understand how dangerous the situation was. If Suzumo was mentally affected by the Rakshasa's words and had indeed revealed an opening, or if he had been a teeny bit slower, he would have been the one laying on the ground. Suzumo glared at the Rakshasa's corpse with a dark gaze. Most of what the Rakshasa said was true. Suzumo was not a saint and had never thought of rescuing everybody. However, with the fates of Little Fatty, Monkey, and the others unknown in Myriad Phenomenon City, he knew he definitely had to check things out. The situation in Myriad Phenomenon City seemed dire. Perhaps it might be even worse than he had imagined. A single Rakshasa was already so troublesome to deal with. Suzumo truly did not have much confidence if there were truly more than 100 Rakshasas in Myriad Phenomenon City. Furthermore, through the dead Rakshasa, Suzumo discovered that there was a Rakshasa leader as well. The strength of the Rakshasa leader might be comparable to a nascent soul. Naturally, the safest option right now was to consume elixirs and recuperate on the spot. Even if he could not recover to his peak condition, He had to recover his spirit energy by at least 80% before returning with his golden core phenomenon. That was the safest option. However, Suzimo was truly worried about Little Fatty and the others. The more he thought about it, the more uneasy he felt. After a momentary silence, he decided to return to Myriad Phenomenon City immediately. Please let nothing happen to them. Suzimo murmured softly with a cold gaze. In a flash, he sped in the direction of Myriad Phenomenon City. Blood chi surged into the skies and vengeful spirits surrounded Myriad Phenomenon City. On the streets, the roofs, and every single corner, splinted limbs and cold corpses could be seen. It was a terrifying sight. The dark lights in midair were still hovering around. Sinister laughters could be heard everywhere. Every single Rakshasa whisked a barely alive cultivator in their hands. They chewed off flesh in huge mouthfuls, and their eyes shone with green, excited glints. Of the 100,000 Paragons, close to half were dead and even more were injured. I've already said that no one is allowed to leave without my permission. The god race leader stood in the air and looked down at the incomparably frightened cultivators below. Although his tone was calm, it possessed an unquestionable authority. Nobody dared to challenge the god race. Anyone that challenged the god race only had death awaiting them. Gradually, some of the cultivators stopped their attempts to flee, and their eyes were filled with endless despair. Some of them stood on the spot stiffly and gazed at the corpses in the cesspools of blood with blank expressions, as though they've lost their souls. Very good. The god race leader's lips curled and gave a chill remark. As long as you guys stay here obediently, I won't kill unreasonably, nor would I consume you guys as food like the Rakshasa race. In the eyes of the god race, humans were extremely cheap and their flesh were incomparably dirty. They could not bring themselves to consume something this lowly. Humph. When he heard that, the Rakshasa leader in midair harumphed coldly and raised his arm before hollering, "Clansmen, have you had your fill? My stomach's almost bursting. Enjoyable." A Rakshasa roared in laughter. The Rakshasa leader nodded and waved his hand before declaring, "Ants of the human race, listen up. As long as you guys stay in Myriad Phenomenon City obediently and not harbor any thoughts of escaping, the Rakshasa race can spare your lives for the time being as well. Leader, although we've had our fill of eating, we haven't had our fill for killing." A Rakshasa shouted, unable to contain the excitement in his eyes. "What do you know?" The Rakshasa leader smiled sinisterly. "If we kill the humans, their flesh won't be fresh anymore. I intend to rear them in Myriad Phenomenon City as food for us in the future." "You sure are wise, leader." Many Rakshasas shouted in unison as their eyes lit up. Perfected Lord Yujun trembled in rage when he heard that. Monk Inlu sighed deeply. When he saw everything that was happening, it was as though he could feel the despair and helplessness of the human race back in the primordial era when they were subjugated by the 10,000 races. More cultivators stopped in their escape attempts. They had almost no shot at survival if they continued fleeing away from the city. If they remained in Myriad Phenomenon City, they could at least remain alive for a period of time. "Nian Qi is in the hands of the god race. I can't leave. You guys leave first and look for first. Don't let him return here no matter what." Ching Ching had a conflicted expression and eventually made the decision after mulling momentarily. Little Fatty and the others did not recognize Nian Qi. However, Ching Ching could see it clearly. The woman with her hands and feet bound by the god race was none other than Nian Qi. "I won't leave either if you're not leaving." The spirit tiger suppressed his fear and thumped himself on the chest with a firm look on his face. "Don't worry, Hubat Ian will be here with you. These intruders from other races will have to get by me before they can get to you." Ching Ching was touched and looked at the spirit tiger with reddened eyes. "We're not leaving either." Monkey's scarlet eyes flickered as he said calmly, "Brother Monkey, you? There's no need for that. We're sworn siblings, so we naturally have to go through thick and thin together." "That's right. Thick and thin." The golden lion nodded as well and gripped his fists. Little Fatty scratched his head and turned to look at Long Ro and Lin Xuanji in an undecided manner. Lin Xuanji gave a bitter chuckle. There's no way I'm going to leave. Myriad Phenomenon City was established by Enigma Palace. As the current generation's disciple of Enigma Palace, this has to be my burial ground even if I have to die. Ji Chengtian's eyes shone brightly as he said in a dark manner, let's stay here as well. Right now, most of the cultivators have chosen to stay in Myriad Phenomenon City, and only few are fleeing out. If we make any reckless move, we'll definitely become a target for the Rakshasa and God race. All right, everyone agreed. Everyone, gather around these three nascent souls. The Rakshasa leader looked at perfected Lord Yujun and the other two and said in a mocking tone, why are you moving so slow? Do you have a death wish? A cultivator who was severely injured and staggered was chided by a Rakshasa. Instantly, his head was sliced off and he was killed on the spot. The remaining cultivators were horrified and made haste. Everyone from the god race stood with arrogant expressions with their hands behind their backs. There was no pity in their eyes as they watched coldly from the sidelines. Before long, the cultivators in the city were gathered together in a dense group. With the support of perfected Lord Luo Shui, perfected Lord Yujun struggled to stand up and looked down. There were more than 100,000 human paragons in this place just yesterday. Now, there were only around 50,000 left. Half of the cultivators had turned into cold corpses that were in eternal slumber. Tragic. Half of the remaining 50,000 cultivators were injured as well and would end up as food for the Rakshasa race. Nobody will be spared. Tears streamed down the face of perfected Lord Yujun as his lips quivered. After a moment, he chose to remain silent, and his voice was converted to a deep sigh. The Myriad Phenomenon Peak was behind them. The mountain peak was established here in the ancient era and had witnessed the birth of countless paragons and monster incarnates, as well as the rise of the human race. It witnessed the fights and clashes of the ancient emperors. But now, the mountain peak was made to witness the massacre of 100,000 paragons by intruders of a foreign race. This day would eventually become the most humiliating and darkest chapter of the history of the human race. Chapter 764, Unyielding Humans. Chapter 764, Unyielding Humans. Gooey, fresh blood seeped between the gaps of the stone slabs in a grisly manner. More than 100 Rakshasas circled around the remaining cultivators, and their massive feet left behind bloodied footprints on the stone slabs in a frightening manner. The tall and massive bodies of the Rakshasa and their pitch-black meat wings exerted immense pressure. Within the group, many cultivators shivered with lowered heads. They did not dare to face the menacing faces and green eyes of the Rakshasa race. The atmosphere was turning extremely repressive. In fact, many cultivators were wary about how they breathed, afraid that they might draw the attention of the Rakshasa race with any activity. Ha 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 ha. The Rakshasa leader was delighted when he saw that and reared his head in laughter. So, these are the so-called paragons of the human race. How worthless. Nobody refuted him. Lin Xuanji and the others had cold expressions. Although their hearts were blazing with rage, they repressed their emotions. The god race leader stood in the air and swept his gaze across the cultivators gathered beneath indifferently. Most of the cultivators here can't be considered as paragons. He paused for a moment before changing the topic, smirking in a carefree manner. I heard that there's a total of 108 spots on the phenomenon ranking of the human race. Only those that are able to get a spot on the phenomenon ranking can be considered as true paragons of the human race. Huh. The Rakshasa leader grinned. His gaze fluttered as he declared loudly, "Who are the paragons of the phenomenon ranking? Stand up and let me take a look at you." He placed emphasis on the word paragon, and his tone was murderous. Everyone could hear the killing intent in the Rakshasa leader's tone. Originally, a listing on the phenomenon ranking was an immense honor for cultivators, and they would gain fabulous rewards as well. But now, the phenomenon ranking was a mark of death for these cultivators. Nobody stood out. Anybody that stood out would die. Foo-foo. The Rakshasa leader laughed sinisterly. I'm going to start killing people if nobody comes forth automatically. A stir broke out amongst the crowd. "Please spare my life, Senior. I'm willing to follow you and be your slave or spirit beast." Finally, a cultivator that could not handle the pressure fell to a thud on his knees before the Rakshasa leader with a frightful expression. It was Duan Qingping of Clear Wind Temple, who was ranked 20 on the phenomenon ranking. He was definitely able to be considered as a paragon of the human race. However, at that moment, Duan Qingping knelt before the Rakshasa leader without any shred of dignity and begged for his life loudly. In fact, he was willing to be a spirit beast and slave of the other party. Nobody mocked him. Even the perfected lord of Clear Wind Temple died in the hands of the god race leader. What more could he do? All ants were afraid to die, let alone him. Most cultivators cultivated for the purpose of longevity. Even perfected lords, mighty figures, and patriarchs might not truly be able to let go of their attachments towards life and death, let alone him who was a golden core. "You want to be my slave and spirit beast?" The Rakshasa leader gazed coldly at Duan Qingping as he said slowly, "The human race is not worthy." He gave a cruel laugh and severed Duan Qingping's head with a slash. With a whisk, he grabbed Duan Qingping's head in his hands before smashing it and drinking its brain juices in large mouthfuls. The Rakshasa leader whisked Duan Qingping's head and burst into laughter. "Fufufu, Paragon? Phenomenon ranking? You're only worthy of being food for us." The 100-odd Rakshasa race beings roared in laughter, and their appearances turned even more menacing, resembling malevolent ghosts that crawled out from hell. "Intruders of a foreign race, you deserve to die." Suddenly, a hoarse voice sounded from the crowd. At that moment, it appeared particularly striking. The crowd fell into an uproar. Many cultivators spun around towards the voice. Everyone wanted to see who was the person who dared to leap out with that declaration despite the situation where they could barely save themselves. The laughter of the Rakshasa race came to a sudden stop as well. The Rakshasa leader's face turned ashen immediately. A figure walked out slowly from within the crowd. The cultivator wore black robes and had black hair, but his face was frighteningly pale. He was injured and seemed extremely weak while his gaze was somewhat hollow and stoned. However, the person gave off an extremely sharp aura. He possessed an unparalleled boldness as he walked out from the crowd. Number 7 on the phenomenon ranking, Dugujian. Blood chi was torrential and corpses were strewn everywhere in Myriad Phenomenon City. Nobody could imagine the pressure he had to endure to step out despite the circumstances. Many cultivators had conflicted expressions when they looked at that lonely figure. Some were in revere, some were in pity, and some were numb. Within the crowd, Heng Qiuyu slumped his head as he looked at Dugujian step forward. He lost to Dugujian in the fight for the phenomenon ranking. However, he had never acknowledged defeat even once in his heart. The two of them had a long way to go in the future. It was only at that moment that Heng Qiuyu realized he had lost completely. Sword cultivators specialized in cultivating their ferocities. They cultivated their determination and pushed forward no matter what. However, his sharpness had disappeared completely in the face of the Rakshasa race's massacre. Yet, Dugujian's sharpness remained and was only being honed deeper. He pointed his sword towards the Rakshasas. "Very good, you are very good." The Rakshasa leader twisted his neck with crackling sounds and laughed menacingly with a violent gaze. "Who else is indignant? Step forth. Count me in." Another voice sounded in the crowd. While it was a little tender, it was incomparably resolute. It was Su Xiaoning. This timid girl had changed significantly after experiencing the passing of her kin. At that moment, she mustered great courage and stood forth. Although the Rakshasa race is one of the primordial 9 races, and you have a noble bloodline and great innate strength, so what? During the ancient era, the primordial 9 races lost, and the Rakshasa race did as well. All you could do was live life ignobly. Although we humans are innately weak by birth, we won't allow ourselves to be trampled upon by you foreign races and be slaughtered by you indiscriminately. Her words were powerful, and her tone was robust. Many cultivators were worked up, and their fighting spirits were even ignited. Ha 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 ha. The Rakshasa leader mocked and looked at Xiaoning and Dugu Jian before bursting into laughter. Two mere ants, and you think that's enough to form a rebellion? Count me in. Lin Xuanji stood out with grit teeth. Rakshasa race, this is a sacred place for the human race. Every single tile here was crafted effortlessly by Fairy Ling Long. Even if I have to give up my life, I'll guard this place and never back down. Me too. Demonist G stood forward. Me as well. Little Fatty shrugged his rotund body and squeezed his way out. Count me in. Count me in. Shi Jian, Ji Chengtian, Long Ro, and the others stood forward. Voices sounded within the crowd one after another. Perfected Lord Luo Shui's eyes reddened. Monk In Lu's eyes turned damp as well. Perfected Lord Yujun was emotional, and his body trembled. Those were true paragons. Those were the hopes for the future of the human race. During the ancient era, it was precisely because paragons stood out one after another to fight against the 10,000 races. Every single generation preceded the previous, and they fought against the primordial 9 races, creating the current status quo. The human race was unyielding and would fight. Even if they might not be able to win, they would not yield. That was the spirit of the human race, their soul. Caw-caw. Monkey's inner core circulated, and his body expanded. Demonic chi shrouded around him as he thumped his chest furiously with a raring battle intent. He burst into laughter with a scarlet glint in his eyes. Rakshasa race? What nonsense. I've had it with your ugly faces for a long time. Roar. The spirit tiger and golden lion let out roars one after another as well and walked forth from the crowd. Chapter 765, Hidden Night Spirit. Chapter 765, Hidden Night Spirit. Night Spirit did not speak, nor did he revert to his true form. He merely stood out in silence and stood behind Xiaoning expressionlessly. His pitch-black eyes revealed a conflicted emotion. It wasn't fear. It was more like cautiousness. Nian Qi's hands and feet were bound by the god race, and she had a worn-out expression. Her withered yellow hair covered her peerless features. Her head was slumped the entire time as she remained silent. Fu-fu. The god race leader raised his brow and said with a fake smile, "Seems like it's been a long time since the Rakshasa race has been out. Even these little pets dare to challenge you guys. You look more like a little pet." Since they were already in this state, the spirit tiger no longer had any reservations and shouted, "Your tiger daddy here isn't going to change my name. I'm Hubatian. You must have a death wish." The god race leader's face darkened. The Rakshasa leader burst into laughter. Seems like the god race isn't that much better off either. Even though I don't consume the flesh of humans, I heard that the bones of tigers are great tonics. Leave that spirit tiger to the god race. The god race leader looked down with an arrogant expression and said indifferently, "For me, killing you is as simple as squashing an ant. Lest you claim that I'm bullying you, I'll spare your life if you're even able to defeat the weakest clansman of the god race." The moment he said that, someone from the god race stood out. He had golden hair, azure eyes, and exquisite features as he glared at the spirit tiger with a deadly intent. "Do you think I'll be afraid of you?" The spirit tiger grit his teeth and stood out boldly. To be fair, this was the best possible scenario. Although the Rakshasa and god race leaders were both at Golden Core realm as well, they could kill nascent souls that were above their cultivation realms. The spirit tiger was definitely not a match for them. However, if he was up against an ordinary Rakshasa or god race being, he would have a shot at victory. The Rakshasa leader was delighted and laughed menacingly. "Anyone that can defeat my clansmen can have your lives spared as well. Since you guys have death wishes, I don't have to stand on courtesy." Monkey walked right to the front in huge strides and thumped his chest with both arms, yelling murderously, "Who dares to challenge me?" The tension on both sides was high. How dare a demon monkey act so insolently? You're asking to die. A Rakshasa spread his wings and soared into the air, charging towards Monkey in a flash. That single action caused a massive fight to break out on both sides. Apart from the god race that sent one person to fight against the spirit tiger, the Rakshasa race also sent 13 people to fight against Xiaoning, Little Fatty, Long Ro, Ji Qingtian, Shi Jin, Ming Zhan, Demoness Ji, Monkey, Qing Qing, Night Spirit, Little Fox, the Golden Lion, and Dugu Jian. No matter it was the solo god race being or the 13 Rakshasas, all of them possessed frightening combat strength. However, Little Fatty and the others were at different levels. Monkey had a torrential ferocity and had the advantage against the Rakshasa with his powerful strength, steely fist techniques, and agile movements. The Rakshasa could not get close to him at all. Mingzhen was number 4 on the phenomenon ranking and had a stable foundation. He also knew many secret skills of the Buddhist sects and was protected by the world-cleansing Green Lotus. He was equally matched against the Rakshasa. Ji Qingtian, Long Ro, and the others could only manage to defend passively. Xiaoning, Qing Qing, and the others were in extremely treacherous situations. The moment they exchanged blows, they could die at any moment. Xiaoning was a disciple of Elixir Yang sect. She surpassed everyone in the same cultivation realm in terms of elixir refinement. However, her combat strength was not stellar. How could she fight against the Rakshasas? Clang! The Rakshas's curved saber transformed into a cold streak of light and was about to slice Xiaoning's throat when it was repelled by 5 fingers that darted out of the blue. The fingernails were incomparably sharp and shone with a dark glint. A trail of sparks was released when it clashed against the curved saber of the Rakshasa race. It was Night Spirit. Night Spirit broke free from the attacks of a Rakshasa behind him and had unknowingly appeared beside Xiaoning to rescue her. "Stand behind me." He wasted no time to elaborate and left that remark before shielding Xiaoning behind him. The Rakshasa that was initially chasing after Xiaoning was enraged when his prey that he was about to get his hands on was taken away from him. With that, he charged towards Night Spirit. At the same time, the Rakshasa that was initially fighting Night Spirit closed in as well. 2 Rakshasas attacked at the same time. Night Spirit had a cold gaze and agile movement techniques. His figure flickered non-stop where he stood like a phantom and left a series of afterimages. He was not disadvantaged even against 2 opponents. You are rather capable to be able to defend against 2 Rakshasas. The Rakshasa leader crossed his arms and sneered. Although Qing Qing possessed wings as well, her movement technique was way inferior compared to the Rakshasas. Poof! A flash of bloodlight appeared. In less than 3 breaths, Qing Qing was injured. Although it was not fatal, blood gushed out endlessly from her wounds. Qing Qing's face was pale and had already lost her balance. She was on the verge of falling from midair. Die! The Rakshasa was excited and yelled before slashing down. Swash! Another figure flashed past and rescued Qing Qing from the curved saber of the Rakshasa. It was Night Spirit again. After rescuing Qing Qing, Night Spirit fought against 3 Rakshasas. No matter how frightening the movement techniques of the Rakshasas were or the sort of angles they attacked from, everything was negated as Night Spirit defended every single move. The 3 Rakshasas failed in their slaughter attempts and were instead injured themselves. The Rakshasa leader's expression darkened slightly as he glared at Night Spirit in silence. Night Spirit's situation drew the attention of the 3 nascent souls as well. Perfected Lord Luo Shui asked in surprise, "What is that spirit beast? His movement technique isn't inferior to the Rakshasa race?" "That's not all." Monkey Lu shook his head. "Don't forget, he has yet to revert to his true form. In other words, he is not at the peak of his combat strength right now." Perfected Lord Yujun frowned slightly without saying anything. He was thinking about the reason why. Why was Night Spirit not reverting to his true form even at this point? What was he trying to hide? What were his considerations? Suddenly, an exclamation sounded from the crowd. Little Fox had failed to bewitch a Rakshasa and was almost killed when Night Spirit rescued her. The bloodline of the Rakshasa race is noble and possessed an extremely frightening memory of their legacy, as well as secret skills and cultivation techniques. There was no way a Rakshasa could be bewitched by Little Fox so easily. At that moment, Night Spirit was already fighting against 4 Rakshasas single-handedly. In less than 10 breaths, 3 people were defeated. Furthermore, the situation of the others was not looking good either. They could die at any moment. Although Ji Chengtian was on the phenomenon ranking, his rank was close to the end. Finally, he could not withstand the relentless attacks of the Rakshasa anymore, and his phenomenon shattered. A cold light flashed. By the time Ji Chengtian reacted to it, the light was already close to him. It was too fast. Ugh! Ji Chengtian closed his eyes and sighed internally. Clang! The sound of metal clashing echoed. Brother Ji, back down. I'll help you. Lin Xuanji waved the folding fan in his hand and repelled the Rakshas's curved saber to rescue Ji Chengtian. His blood chi and spirit energy was released completely as he fought against 2 Rakshasas. The disciples of Enigma Palace had never partaken in the fights for the phenomenon ranking. Nobody knew how strong they were. At this moment, many cultivators finally witnessed the capabilities of Lin Xuanji. This was a true paragon of the human race. Although he was fighting against the Rakshasa race, there were no signs of weakness, and he did not back down at all. Chapter 766, Heaven Fiend Dance. Chapter 766, Heaven Fiend Dance. Poof, poof, poof. A flurry of talismans danced in midair with spirit lights spilling everywhere, but none of them could defend against the Rakshas's curved saber. The protection talisman on Long Ro's body was penetrated before long. Sure. In a hair's breadth, a pink-colored ribbon tore through the air and rescued Long Ro from the brink of danger. Demoness Ji was at the other end of the ribbon. Long Ro's face was pale as she said softly, "Thank you. Demoness, you think that you're capable enough to fight 2 of us?" The Rakshasa that targeted Long Ro shifted his cold gaze onto Demoness Ji. Boom! Demoness Ji's golden core phenomenon could not withstand the combined attack of 2 Rakshasas and dispersed immediately. Even for Rintu and Pangyu, who were paragons that were on the top 10 of the phenomenon ranking, they could not defend against the Rakshasa race without the protection of their golden core phenomenons. Swish! 2 figures streaked through the air, and Demoness Ji was flustered for a brief moment. However, she composed herself before long, and a demonic glint shone in her beautiful eyes. Right in front of everyone, she displayed an extremely beguiling technique. She tapped on the ground with light steps, and her figure shuttled through the cold streaks of light, but she was completely unharmed. The speed of the Rakshasa race was absolutely earth-shaking. All the cultivators present could count themselves lucky if they could survive a couple of attacks. However, Demoness Ji managed to avoid the killing move of 2 Rakshasas with her movement technique. Not only that, she did not panic against the 2 Rakshasas, and there was an indescribable beauty in her movement. Her pink figure seemed like it was dancing on the blade of a sword and was incomparably charming. Her movement is a little odd. Perfected Lord Luo Shui said softly. Perfected Lord Yujun mulled for a moment before jerking his head to exclaim, "That's the Heaven Fiend Dance." Ah! A series of exclamations could be heard at the mention of Heaven Fiend Dance. Legend has it that the Heaven Fiend Dance was the secret skill that brought Fairy Ling Long to fame. Although she was not rendered the status of an emperor, Fairy Ling Long was able to match the attacks of any emperor relying on that movement technique. There were even legends that said that emperors fell head over toes for Fairy Ling Long after witnessing her Heaven Fiend Dance. That was the most renowned secret skill of the ancient era. Although Enigma Palace was established by Fairy Ling Long, that secret skill was not passed down. To think that the Heaven Fiend Dance would reappear on Demoness Ji. There's no mistake. Perfected Lord Yujun said deeply, when the human emperor's palace appeared 20 years ago, this pure maiden of the fiend sex entered it as well. She must have learned the Heaven Fiend Dance from the human emperor's palace. It did not resemble a movement technique at all. It was more like she was truly dancing. Demoness Ji's figure was elegant and her feet were light. As her skirt fluttered, she displayed her figure perfectly and revealed a sensational charm. The sharp saber lights brushed past her body by a hair's breadth. As time passed by, Demoness G's movement became increasingly fluid and an invisible aura was formed around her. Her aura encompassed the two Rakshasas. Both of them looked flustered and their movement techniques became sluggish, as though they had stepped into a swamp. Humph! The Rakshasa leader's expression turned grim as he harumphed coldly. Initially, he thought that his clansmen would be able to crush all the ants in less than 10 breaths. To think that they were having some issues. Do you need the god race to give you a hand? The god race leader tilted his head and asked with a smile. The Rakshasa leader grit his teeth. No. On the other side, the spirit tiger's massive body was sent flying by a single punch from the god race being, and he rolled dozens of feet on the ground in a wretched manner. His head was spinning, and he could no longer recall if this was the 5th or 6th time it had happened. At that moment, he was injured from head to toe. He was completely defeated in terms of strength and speed. He was not a match at all. If the spirit tiger did not fuse his palm with the 4 claws of the divine being of the tiger race back in the astral dragon sputum lair and underwent a complete transformation, his body would have been ruptured by the god race being a long time ago. The spirit tiger felt that he was already at his limits to be able to survive till now. Roar! He growled deeply and attempted to struggle and stand up. However, he knelt onto the ground with a thud. It's over. The god race being strode over in huge steps and reached out, thumping down onto the spirit tiger's massive head. If the hit landed, a bloody hole would definitely appear on the spirit tiger's forehead. All of a sudden, a dark figure that resembled a figure appeared out of thin air and punched out, colliding against the god race being's fist. You're asking for death? The god race being merely laughed in contempt, without even making out who the intruder was. No matter who it was, anyone that tried to take the god race head-on in melee combat to challenge their physique and blood chi merely had a death wish. The god race being channeled his golden blood chi, and he shone brilliantly like a divine being. His aura rose intensely, and the sound of tsunami even echoed from the surface of his fist. Bang! The two fists collided. The moment the flesh and bones collided, a dull sound of defeat echoed. The expression of the god race being froze, and his initially disdainful gaze vanished immediately. He frowned and staggered 3 steps back, as though he was in considerable pain. A god race being was knocked back by someone else. Everyone focused their attention and were dumbstruck. It was Night Spirit. Unknowingly, Night Spirit managed to break out of the focused attack from 4 Rakshasas and charged over to punch someone from the god race and rescue the spirit tiger. You have a death wish. The god race being was enraged and charged towards Night Spirit. At the same time, the 4 Rakshasas arrived. Right now, Night Spirit was fighting against 4 Rakshasas and a god race being. However, there were still no signs of his defeat. The god race leader narrowed his gaze and his eyes flickered. This was getting interesting. What was this thing that was able to match the Rakshasa race in speed and the god race in strength? Almost at the same time, the Rakshasa and god race leaders exchanged glances. The god race leader smiled gently and asked, "Can you tell what's the background of the man in black?" "I don't care what he is. At the very most, I'll step in personally to kill him once and for all." The Rakshasa leader replied coldly without any expression. "That's true." The god race leader nodded. "Although he is fast and has decent strength, he's far off when compared to us." Just as the two leaders were chatting idly, something changed on the battlefield. The golden lion finally failed to defend and was slashed across the back by a Rakshasa. Almost cut into 2, he fell to the ground severely injured and passed out on the spot with blood gushing out. Xiaoning rushed over hurriedly. Night Spirit frowned slightly, and a brutal killing intent flashed through his deep eyes briefly before vanishing. Roar! Monkey shielded the golden lion behind him, and his eyes shone with a bloodshot shade. He let out a deafening roar and completely entered a berserk state. His bloodshot eyes seemed like they possessed boundless strength. In his berserk state, Monkey triggered the power in the depths of his bloodline, and his strength and speed exploded. He had almost no sanity left, and the only thought in his mind was to kill. Furthermore, he could not experience pain on his body. Among the 7 sworn siblings, apart from Night Spirit and Suzimo, Monkey was the strongest. Monkey was even more frightening in his berserk state. Chapter 767, Return. Chapter 767, Return. The curved saber of the Rakshasa punctured Monkey deep in the chest and was less than half an inch away from his heart. As though he could not experience any pain, Monkey's eyes were bloodshot and his ferocity was not diminished. He extended his thick arms and grabbed the Rakshasa before him. The Rakshasa had swift reflexes and wanted to withdraw his curved saber and soar into the skies instantly. However, Monkey's flesh and bones hardened and caused the curved saber to be stuck for a moment. Get down. That brief moment was all it took for Monkey to grab the Rakshasa's meat wings and yank the latter down from midair. Boom! There was a deafening sound. The Rakshasa smashed onto the ground heavily and created a gigantic pit with dust and gravel flying everywhere. It was a heavy smash, and the Rakshasa let out a tragic cry. His blood was dispersed, and his bones felt as though they were going to break. Gagaga! Monkey grinned and grabbed the Rakshasa's meat wing with one arm. With a whirl, he yanked the Rakshasa out of the pit and smashed the latter fiercely onto the other side. Bang! 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 He repeated it thrice in succession. The Rakshasa was severely injured from the smashes and was barely breathing. The Rakshasa race had a frightening bloodline. If it was any other living being, they would have been smashed into sludge. A cold streak of light appeared stealthily. Another Rakshasa charged over. Although Monkey was in a berserk state and had lost his rationality, his reflexes were sharp. Instantly, his tall and mighty body curled into a ball. The shift was rather intuitive, and he managed to avoid the fatal attack of the Rakshasa. Monkey's motions did not stop at all as his body suddenly spread open, pushing towards the Rakshasa as though he was offering an immortal fruit. That was a killing move from the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. Crackle! After Monkey's massive body curled up and unfurled, his tendons shuddered and his bones rang to release an unparalleled strength. Because the movement technique of the Rakshasa was too swift, it was already too late for him to avoid the move. Bang! Monkey's hands pushed up violently against the Rakshasa's lower jaw. Snap! The jarring sound of bones cracking echoed. The gruesome head of the Rakshasa was tossed back fiercely and his lower jaws were smashed. With a twist, Monkey chased forward and his arms sank down, thrusting his elbows into the chest of the Rakshasa like twin spears. The Rakshasa's body smashed onto the ground with 2 bloody holes in his chest. His heart was punctured and he died on the spot. The crowd fell into an uproar. Instantly, the tides on the battlefield had shifted. Nobody expected the 2 Rakshasas that initially had the advantage to wind up injured and dead. This was the first time that the Rakshasa race had been dealt such a blow since they entered Myriad Phenomenon City. Although none of the cultivators present dared to protest, all of them cheered in their hearts. Although there are more than 100,000 Paragons, only few of them dare to step forth. They're not even comparable to these few demon beasts. What a tragedy! Perfected Lord Yujun lamented sorrowfully. It did not matter even if a Rakshasa was killed before them. The situation was not going to change. As long as the Rakshasa and God race leaders were to attack, they would definitely overwhelm everything in a domineering manner and nobody would be able to get out alive. Right at that moment, 2 figures that were clashing together suddenly separated. Dugu Jin staggered with a frightfully pale expression and was drenched in sweat. It was clear that he was thoroughly exhausted, at his limits and could no longer continue. The Rakshasa that faced him had a calm expression and stood on the spot motionlessly. A moment later, the glint in the eyes of the Rakshasa gradually dimmed. Everyone focused their attention. An eerie scarlet line appeared on the Rakshasa's glabella. It became increasingly clear and eventually, a drop of fresh blood oozed out of it. It was a fatal sword strike. The Rakshasa's head was sliced apart. The sword strike was so swift that the wound closed on itself instantly, resulting in the bizarre scene. Another Rakshasa was dead. In truth, Dugu Jin was injured to begin with and was suppressed by the Rakshasa the entire time. However, Monkey's intense battle earlier on distracted the Rakshasa for a brief moment. Dugu Jin cultivated the Tao of the sword, and his focus was crystal clear. His heart of the sword gave him clarity, and he was extremely sharp towards anything that happened in outside world. He spotted that brief opening instantly. His sword strike was a fatal blow. While the Rakshasa was fast, his sword was faster. Although it was only a single strike, he exemplified the terrifying killing power of the Tao of the sword to its greatest extent. His sword strike seemed like it was sending a message to everyone. Even the primordial 9 races are not invincible and will die. Even they can't deal with the sharpness of the sword Tao. The Rakshasa leader's expression was completely ashen after 2 of his Rakshasa clansmen were killed in succession. Good strike, good strike. He clapped with a cold gaze and said frostily, "Initially, I was considering whether I should spare your lives. But now, I've made up my mind." The Rakshasa leader snarled word by word murderously, "None of you human paragons shall dream about leaving Myriad Phenomenon City alive. You're dishonest, reneging on your words." Xiaoning glared furiously as she pointed to Dugu Jin and Monkey. It's clear that they won. Dishonest? The Rakshasa leader stared at Xiaoning and sneered, "I'm the one that sets the rules, so I decide what happens. Ants like you aren't worthy of negotiating with me. I'm going to have all the paragons on the phenomenon ranking buried here. The Golden Core phenomenon ranking is the greatest joke of your human race. From this day forth, the phenomenon ranking shall become history." Nobody spoke, and the atmosphere was tense. It was as the Rakshasa leader had said. If the paragons on the phenomenon ranking were all dead and more than 100,000 paragons were buried here, the phenomenon ranking would become the greatest humiliation of the cultivation world. Even if the phenomenon ranking was established by Fairy Ling Long and had been passed down from the ancient era, Enigma Palace would be too ashamed to carry on hosting it. "I'm afraid to disappoint you," Dugu Jin said coldly. "The top 2 of the phenomenon ranking have left Myriad Phenomenon City a long time ago. Those 2 are the true paragons of our human race, true monster incarnates who are comparable to the human emperor. I'm merely 7th on the phenomenon ranking, but I'm already able to slay you Rakshasas. If those 2 monster incarnates are here, there's no way you intruders of foreign races will be able to maintain that cockiness." The 2 monster incarnates that Dugu Jin was referring to were Su Zimo and Diin. He. The Rakshasa leader sneered. Paragons? Monster incarnates? Those 2 must be scared out of their wits such that they don't dare to return, right? His words resonated with the thoughts of many cultivators present. If they were in the same position and saw what happened in Myriad Phenomenon City, they would have chosen to flee far away instead of returning to the city. Even the nascent souls had to avoid this and chose to flee. What did it matter if they were paragons on the phenomenon ranking? The situation right now was extremely clear. Myriad Phenomenon City was an endless hell, and anybody that entered will not have a chance to leave. The Rakshasa leader rubbed his chin and laughed menacingly. "If those 2 dare to return, I guess I'll give them a chance to survive. They can be my spirit beast slaves." "Kill them." The Rakshasa leader waved, and more than 10 mighty figures behind him transformed into streaks of dark lights that bolted towards Monkey and the others. Perfected Lord Yujun and the other 2 bore pained expressions. Naturally, they could tell that Monkey and the others were already at the end of the road. How could they defend against the attacks of more than 10 Rakshasas? Suddenly, a long howl sounded from the distant horizons, tearing through the clouds and shattering metal and rocks. Everyone was shocked. The moment the first howl landed, a second howl sounded. The second howl was even closer. Chapter 768, How Dare You? None of you shall be spared. Chapter 768, How Dare You? None of you shall be spared. The intruder did not bother to conceal his tracks and charged right into Myriad Phenomenon City. Moreover, his speed was shocking. The first howl was distant, but the second howl was already close to Myriad Phenomenon City. Many Rakshasas paused in their tracks and turned towards the sound. Little Fatty and the others were invigorated when they heard that voice. Perfected Lord Yujun and the others were first stunned. Thereafter, they could not help but stand up, as though they had recalled something. Many cultivators had lost expressions. For most of them, the howl did not sound familiar. They truly could not understand how anyone would choose to barge into the Myriad Phenomenon City to their deaths given the circumstances. Could it be someone else from the primordial 9 races? Not long after, a figure sprinted in from outside the city. His green robes fluttered elegantly. Ah! When he came closer, and everyone took a closer look, they could not help but exclaim, Su Zimo. The intruder was none other than the top of the phenomenon ranking this time round. He was the person who managed to cultivate 3 golden core phenomenons, suppressed Dean domineeringly, and even dared to challenge nascent souls, Su Zimo. Everyone was worked up. Even Perfected Lord Yujun and the other 2 were emotional. By some freak coincidence, Su Zimo managed to leave Myriad Phenomenon City and avoid this catastrophe. None of them expected him to make the decision to return. You are truly befitting to be number 1 on the phenomenon ranking. Dugu Jin spoke slowly and made the remark. This was the sort of courage that the number 1 of the phenomenon ranking should possess. This was the true boldness befitting of the number 1 perfected being. Little Fatty and the others could not help but cheer at the sight of Su Zimo's return. Although the remaining 50,000 cultivators did not cheer, they were much more spirited and positive as well. The Rakshasa and God Race leaders could clearly sense the shift in the moods of the cultivators. The God Race leader glanced at Su Zimo indifferently for a brief moment before retracting his gaze. He had seen too many of such paragons and monster incarnates, and killed too many of them as well. This person looked extremely ordinary. There was nothing special about him. He was long indifferent to things. The Rakshasa leader stuck out his grisly red tongue and smacked his lips. He glared at Su Zimo's body and sniffed carefully before murmuring in an intoxicated manner, to think that there would be such high-quality meat in the human race. How rare. Su Zimo's expression had been frighteningly grim ever since he entered Myriad Phenomenon City. Myriad Phenomenon City was dyed almost entirely red and corpses were strewn everywhere in a horrifying sight. Those cultivators had died in wretched manners. Many of the corpses were incomplete, and there were clear signs of their bodies being chewed off. When he came closer and saw the injuries on Little Fatty and the others, the killing intent in Su Zimo's eyes intensified. They were almost corporeal and could spew out. Su Zimo swept his gaze through the crowd and lingered briefly on Perfected Lord Yujun's group. The situation was even worse than he had imagined. Of the dozens of nascent souls, more than half might have already died. Eventually, Su Zimo's gaze shifted onto Nian Qi. Nian Qi's head was initially slumped, and she did not speak at all, nor did she acknowledge Qing Qing and the others. She was worried that she would implicate them. However, when she detected Su Zimo's gaze, Nian Qi could not hold it back any longer. Instantly, all the grievances she suffered surged into her heart as she bawled out in tears, "Mister, don't cry. I'll save you." Su Zimo's voice was gentle. Ugh. Nian Qi held her tears back and nodded with vigor. Tisk. The God Race leader could not help but laugh as he said idly with mocking eyes, "If I were you, I'd start thinking about how to save myself instead." The other 6 God Race beings crossed their arms and burst into laughter. When Su Zimo approached, many cultivators gradually noticed something unusual. His spirit energy seems to be depleted. Yes, I sense that too. How is he going to fight against the Rakshasa and God Race like that? I heard that he's extremely strong in melee combat and can even take on a demon form. What's the use of a demon form? What demon can take on the primordial 9 races? Can he defeat nascent souls in his demon form? Those 2 leaders of their foreign races are even able to kill nascent souls. Many cultivators discussed in hushed whispers, and their initial elation gradually sank again. Everyone could tell that Su Zimo was in a terrible condition. His spirit energy was almost completely depleted after his massive fight with Dean. He also had a long journey back without resting at all. In fact, he looked weathered by the time he returned to Myriad Phenomenon City. Zemo, hurry and leave. Leave us. Suddenly, perfected Lord Luo Shui's voice sounded in Su Zemo's mind. She was using her essence spirit to send him a voice transmission. Notwithstanding the fact that your spirit energy is depleted and you're unable to release your golden core phenomenon, even if you're at your peak condition, you might not be a match for the Rakshasa and God race leaders. Perfected Lord Yujun sent a voice transmission as well. You possess specialties from the immortal, Buddhist, and Fiend Daos, and you're the hope of the human race. As long as you don't die, you will definitely be accomplished in the future. It's difficult for a lone tree to survive in a burning forest. The outcome here is determined, and there's no need for you to force or blame yourself. This is fate. Monkey Lu sighed gently. Patron Su, hurry and flee. Su Zemo remained silent. However, his expression was so cold that it was terrifying. Even if it wasn't for Little Fatty and the others, even if it wasn't for Nian Qi, Su Zemo would not leave. He was displeased. Ever since he entered Myriad Phenomenon City, he bore an anger in his heart that he could not vent. He could not stand by idly and watch as the foreign races trampled and massacred humans. This was Myriad Phenomenon City, a sacred ground for the human race. He cultivated the techniques of the immortal, Buddhist, and Fiend Daos and secret skills of the human emperor to become #1 on the phenomenon ranking. If he were to flee today, how would he be able to face the human emperor and Fairy Ling Long? Escape? Suddenly, the Rakshasa leader burst into laughter and said coolly, "You 3 old fogies intend for him to escape? Do you really think he can escape?" Perfected Lord Yujun and the other 2 were startled. The Rakshasa race could detect their voice transmissions using their spirit consciousnesses. Indeed, the primordial 9 races had unimaginable capabilities, and it was difficult to defend against them. The thought of escaping hasn't crossed my mind. Right then, Su Zemo turned around and gazed at the Rakshasas nearby with a calm expression. Slowly, he said, "I did not cultivate just so I can escape. I want to vent every bit of displeasure in my heart. I want to have peace of mind. I believe in an eye for an eye. All of you intruders from foreign races must die as well." Su Zemo's tone turned increasingly intense towards the end, and his killing intent surged. His voice was like a bell that shook the voids. "I'll let you guys understand that this is a sacred place for the human race that shall not be sullied. Intruders of foreign races, how dare you? None of you shall be spared." By the time Su Zemo's declaration was complete, Bloodquencher was already in his hands. Its blade buzzed and a blood beam expanded. "Ant, you have a death wish." The Rakshasa leader was enraged, and his eyes shone with fury. "There's no need to use a sledgehammer just to crack a nut. I'll slaughter him for you, leader." A Rakshasa darted forward and spread his wings before transforming into a dark streak of light. He burst towards Su Zemo at a terrifying speed. "Kill!" Su Zemo did not dodge or avoid and circulated his inner core. He welcomed the attack and released a loud shout. The secret skill, Thunderclap Kill. The energy of the sound wave exploded instantly. With a brief pause in the Rakshas's movements, the blood beam shrouded over his head. There was nowhere for him to run. Clang! The curved saber and Bloodquencher collided violently. Su Zemo's attack carried his wrath. As for the Rakshasa, his blood chi was almost completely dissipated after the burst of Thunderclap Kill. His strength was diminished, and he was at his weakest. The difference between them was clear. Victory was determined with a single strike. Chapter 769, Massacre. Chapter 769, Massacre. The dark light paused briefly and revealed the Rakshasa. Poof! The Rakshasa spat out a huge mouthful of blood with a pale expression. His palm was split with fresh blood gushing, and he could no longer maintain his grip on the curved saber. It was repelled instantly. "I've got to escape first." This human is too strong and I can't win him in terms of strength. I've got to wrap around him and look for another opportunity. The Rakshas's reflexes were extremely swift, and those thoughts flashed through his mind one after another. Swoosh! The meat wings of the Rakshasa flapped and wind howled. A tremendous power was released as he attempted to soar into the air and flee. Under normal circumstances, there would naturally be a brief respite between both parties after a full-on clash. However, Suzumo's body sounded with the sound of tsunami. His strength that was deteriorated after the collision received a fresh boost like the surge of a tide. That was tidal might. Suzumo had a cold expression and his movements did not stop at all. With the strength of tidal might, he leaned in and his saber force shifted. The blade released a slight vibration as though it was forming blood-colored ripples in midair. The blood-colored ripples smudged across the Rakshasa's throat gently. His two attacks, one tough and the other gentle, were fluid as water without any delays at all. The tall and mighty body of the Rakshasa could not get out of Suzumo's saber force's range at all. Poof! A massive current of blood spurted out. A gruesome head was lopped high into the air with fresh blood spraying everywhere. The headless corpse of the Rakshasa collapsed stiffly onto the ground and writhed unconsciously. Suddenly, the battlefield went silent. Nobody expected this outcome in the fight between Suzumo and the Rakshasa. Less than that, nobody expected Suzumo to kill the Rakshasa with 2 slashes. For any outsider, the entire process seemed fleeting and simple. However, nobody knew that Suzumo had used at least 3 of his trump cards in order to kill the Rakshasa. The Rakshasa's death was not worthless. The Rakshasa leader glared at Suzumo and said slowly, "Don't worry, I won't let you die so easily. I'm going to torture you bit by bit and have you suffer an existence worse than death." His smile turned more sinister as he waved. "Tie him up and kill everyone else. Spare no one." Understood. The many Rakshasas behind him agreed in unison. "When the battle breaks out, I might not be able to protect all of you. Everyone, watch out." Suzumo glanced sideways and instructed little Fatty and the others. The dangers in this battle were unprecedented. Even Suzumo was not confident about it. Notwithstanding the Rakshasa and God race leaders who could kill nascent souls, even the 100-odd Rakshasas that were about to attack were difficult to deal with. Night Spirit's expression changed and his gaze flickered. A moment later, it was as though Night Spirit had made up his mind about something. "First, I'm going to fight together with you later." Night Spirit did not speak. However, his voice sounded inside Suzumo's mind. Night Spirit was a spirit beast that was only at Golden Core realm, yet he could utilize the secret skill of nascent souls to send voice transmissions. Suzumo looked at Night Spirit deeply. He was almost completely certain that Night Spirit was hiding a secret. Furthermore, it was a secret that had to be hidden. Previously, Night Spirit was even able to fend off 5 Rakshasas in the battle earlier on. Now that Night Spirit said that he was going to fight together with Suzumo, it seemed as though he was implying something unusual. Kill! Many Rakshasas flashed and dozens of dark lights scattered throughout the voids in all directions, charging towards Suzumo instantly. Even a nascent soul might not be able to escape from such an attack unscathed. However, Suzumo had an unfazed expression as he swung Blood Quencher and released the saber techniques of the Sea Calming Manual and Azura Saber together. The saber forces were relentlessly tight and nothing could penetrate them. The Rakshasa race was smart, and they were innately talented in combat. The moment they sensed Suzumo's immense strength, they naturally chose not to take him head-on and instead circled around him continuously. On the battlefield, Suzumo's figure almost completely vanished, and he was shrouded by a blood beam around him that formed a blood-colored barrier. In the skies, streaks of dark lights danced and revolved while charging forward continuously. They attempted to destroy the defense of the blood barrier, but to no avail. If this drags on, Suzumo is going to be disadvantaged. That's right, the saber technique released by Suzumo requires immense stamina and mental focus. He can't afford to be distracted in the slightest bit. However, The Rakshasas are merely dancing effortlessly in the air, biding their time. Victory for them is almost guaranteed. Perfected Lord Yujun's group revealed worried expressions as they panicked. If Suzimo could not break out of this, he would die of exhaustion. On the other end, more than 30 Rakshasas lunged towards Little Fatty and the others. Everyone had grim expressions. Suzimo could defend against the combined attack of more than 10 Rakshasas. However, the most they could defend against were 2 Rakshasas. Furthermore, the spirit tiger was severely injured in his fight earlier on. Monkey's eyes were no longer bloodshot, and his berserk state had worn off. The injury on his chest was deep, and he was almost incapable of fighting any longer with his diminished strength. There were only a few of them who could continue to defend against the Rakshasas properly. Their situation was not much better than Suzimo's. Little Fatty, Lin Xuanji, and Demonis G stood forward and shielded the group with resolute gazes, as though they were prepared to die. Monkey, the spirit tiger, and the other spirit beasts struggled to stand up with no hint of fear as well. The 50,000 cultivators remaining had conflicted expressions as they looked at the figures before them. Deep in their eyes, there were even hints of guilt and shame. Although they were referred to as Paragons, they were scared out of their wits by the foreign intruders right now and even had to depend on the demon beasts before them for protection. For the first time, everyone felt as though they were not worthy of being called Paragons. More than 30 Rakshasas lunged forward with an unstoppable might, as though they could shred everything in their path to pieces. Against the pressure, Little Fatty and the other 2 were drenched in sweat and felt immensely tense. Even their arms were trembling slightly. All 3 of their golden core phenomenons had already dissipated. Although Heaven Fiend Dance was the secret skill of Fairy Ling Long, it could not defend against the massacre of so many Rakshasas. While Lin Xuanji possessed a multitude of techniques, he also felt despaired and helpless at the moment. All of a sudden, just as the 3 of them were about to give up, a figure that resembled a phantom darted out from behind them. It charged towards the large group of Rakshasas without any decrease in speed. Ah! A series of exclamations came from the crowd. Who was it? Who was it that had no regard for his life? Was he trying to use his body to delay the slaughter of the Rakshasas? That would be a joke. As thoughts ran wildly through the minds of the cultivators present, that figure had already clashed against the large group of Rakshasas. A blood mist spread almost instantly upon collision. The figure vanished entirely, as though it was smashed into sludge. However, the next moment, all the cultivators exclaimed. A corpse fell from midair. It was the corpse of a Rakshasa. There were 5 holes the size of fingers on the head of the corpse, and retching brain juices oozed from them. The Rakshasa was completely dead. Many cultivators were dumbstruck, and their minds went blank. They could not figure out what was happening. The figure that initially vanished reappeared in midair like a phantom and brushed past another Rakshasa. It reached out and grabbed at an extremely terrifying speed. Snap! The Rakshas's throat was crushed by its palm, and it died on the spot. Night Spirit! Ching Ching exclaimed. A massacre had arrived under the guise of the night. Chapter 770, Heavenly Encompassing Formation. Chapter 770, Heavenly Encompassing Formation. In less than 3 breaths, 2 Rakshasas died in succession. Many cultivators watched with widened eyes and bated breaths in disbelief. The Rakshasa race was one of the primordial 9 races. They possessed a noble bloodline, a pair of meat wings and agile movement techniques. All the cultivators present had experienced the terror of the Rakshasa race. But now, 2 Rakshasas were dead just like that. Furthermore, the cause of their deaths was practically unknown. Even for Monkey, the spirit tiger, and the others who had watched Night Spirit grow up and were even sworn siblings with him now were shocked, let alone the other cultivators. While they knew that Night Spirit was strong, none of them expected him to be this frightening. More than 30 Rakshasas charged together at the same time, and briefly later, 2 of them were dead. His capabilities and combat strength were out of this world. It's no wonder why I lost. The golden lion murmured. He suffered a loss the first time he met Night Spirit. Initially, the golden lion wanted to cultivate harder and seek an opportunity to get even in the future. At this point, that thought had vanished into thin air. The three nascent souls exchanged glances. All of them could see the shock and bewilderment in the other's eyes. The others might not be able to see the fight clearly. However, the three of them possessed spirit consciousnesses and could vaguely see the entire process of Night Spirit's fight with the large group of Rakshasas. It was shocking, perfect, and frightening. Night Spirit was decisive and vicious without any bit of hesitation or stagnation. Every single strike was a killing attack. For the three of them, their first reaction towards the process was shock. Be it in terms of timing, angle, movement technique, speed, strength of burst, or choice of target, Night Spirit's attacks were perfect. They were completely flawless. However, the more they thought about it, the more frightening it seemed. Even if the three of them were in peak conditions, they might not be able to defend against Night Spirit's attacks unscathed. Night Spirit was practically born to kill. From him, there was a faint, antiquated aura that was dark and cold. It was unsettling and sent chills down one's spine. At their cultivation realm, perfected Lord Yujun and the other two had broken free of the shackles of heaven and earth, and their lifespans were at 1,000 years. This was a feeling that they did not experience even when they faced the Rakshasa race. But from Night Spirit's aura, the three of them felt a chill. Right as the three nascent souls were imagining things, another Rakshasa fell from midair with a hole in his chest. His heart was crushed. Night Spirit's figure was like a phantom. It was barely visible under the guise of the night. Although the attacks from the large group of Rakshasas were ferocious, Night Spirit was still able to identify gaps and avoid everything while retaliating. Initially, the God Race leader intended to just sit by idly and watch the show unfold. However, at that moment, he frowned as he glared at Night Spirit's figure. His gaze shone brightly as though he was in deep thought. The Rakshasa leader's face was frighteningly grim. At the same time, something else happened on another side of the battlefield. Ma, and I, Pa, me, Hom. The 6 Sanskrit characters echoed like a resounding bell that rang through the world. The Sanskrit seemed as though they possessed the supreme noble strength of the Buddhist Tao. It was the Daming Mantra. The long-lost ultimate technique of Daming Monastery had reappeared in Myriad Phenomenon City. The power of a single Sanskrit character was enough to rattle the mind of a cultivator. The combined burst of 6 Sanskrit characters shook the world and caused everything to quake. The weather changed and thunder even rumbled at the horizons of the skies in resonance. At the same time, the cultivators that were away from the battlefield felt their blood chi move, and their heartbeats palpitated. However, for the dozens of Rakshasas in the battlefield, they were merely stunned momentarily. Their bloodlines were way too strong. Although the Daming Mantra was powerful, it did not have much effect on them. Right then, Su Zimo struck. Slash. Accompanied by a loud roar, the blood barrier surrounding Su Zimo converged instantly into Blood Quencher in his hands. Immediately after, a blood beam burst through the horizons. Su Zimo's blood chi burst forward as his black hair danced. He carved a gigantic blood-colored semicircular arc in midair that almost cut the entire world into two. Poof, poof, poof. There were at least 10 Rakshasas that were caught up in the blood beam. None of them could defend against that terrifying attack. 3 Rakshasas were cut into 2 on the spot. Even the curved sabers in their hands were shattered by Blood Quencher. Although the remaining Rakshasas managed to defend against the sharpness of Blood Quencher, their bodies could not withstand the burst power of the attack. They coughed out fresh blood and their gazes dimmed as they crashed onto the ground, severely injured. Clang, clang. After the refinement in the backyard at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley, Blood Quencher had become an extremely ferocious weapon. After consuming the fresh blood of the Rakshasas, it now looked sharper and even more terrifying. Its blade emanated a rich blood scent, and it quivered excitedly. Lay down the formation. The voice of the Rakshasa leader sounded suddenly. It was chilling to the bones. Clang, clang. Rakshasas on both sides of the battlefield withdrew iron chains made from mystic metal from their storage bags. In pairs, the Rakshasas tugged on both ends of the chains. They made use of the speed of their movement techniques to circle and weave around Suzimo's surroundings. Suzimo's heart skipped a beat, and he dealt with everything carefully. He did not dare to be careless. The chains were rather flexible. When Blood Quencher slashed at them, it felt as though it was hitting air. Suzimo continued to wave his Blood Quencher, but he could not release the might of his saber. Instead, the room he had available for maneuvering decreased by the moment. Before long, a chain was coiled around his body. Suzimo frowned. There were imperceptible, tiny sharp spikes that were hidden on the chains. They were only revealed after the chain was coiled around Suzimo's body and pierced into his flesh. Even with his powerful physique, Suzimo could not defend against the sharpness of the spikes. His brief moment of distraction caused another chain to coil around his arm twice, restricting the power of Blood Quencher completely. "This is bad," Perfected Lord Luo Shui gasped. More chains coiled around Suzimo's body. The more chains there were, the more difficult it was for Suzimo to break free. Now that the threat of Blood Quencher was gone and Suzimo was trapped in a massive formation, the victory of the Rakshasas was almost guaranteed with their agile movement techniques. One after another, like anacondas, the chains coiled around Suzimo's arms, thighs, chest, back and body tightly and revealed their sharp spikes to tear into his flesh. In the blink of an eye, there were already many chains around Suzimo. The Rakshasa leader's expression loosened up as he laughed menacingly. "Why aren't you struggling anymore, Ant? This is the heavenly encompassing formation of our Rakshasa race. Even the barbarian race of the primordial 9 races won't be able to break free from this, let alone ants such as yourselves." There were dozens of Rakshasas, and each of them held a chain in their hands as they stood in midair and looked down at Suzimo with mocking gazes. Fufufu. Suzimo stood on the spot motionlessly and suddenly let out a laugh. "You think that you can trap me using these pieces of scrap metal?" Chapter 771. Unmatched. Chapter 771. Unmatched. An inner core revolved slowly within Suzimo's chest and shone with a demonic glint. It illuminated his chest inside and outside, creating a blood-colored glow. Even his ribs and beating heart could be faintly seen. A terrifying aura began to spread. With each breath Suzimo took, a scarlet demonic chi would gush out from his nostrils and circle around him. It slowly became richer and purer. Against the shroud of that aura, even the cultivators present felt pressured, let alone the dozens of Rakshasas in midair. "He actually has an inner core?" The eyes of the Rakshasa leader shone. An inner core was equivalent to the golden core of cultivators and was the foundational basis for a demon beast strength, possessing all the essence of their entire cultivation. An inner core that was this pure was definitely a great tonic for any living being. "Behave yourself." A Rakshasa yanked the chains, and it clanged loudly. The chains were lined with spikes. His tug naturally caused the spikes to tear in the flesh and created a miserable ripping sensation in the body. Suzimo did not move at all, and his gaze was ice-cold. As though he could not feel the pain in his body, the ferocity in his eyes intensified instead. "Lowlife, kneel." The dozens of Rakshasas had a tacit understanding. They exerted strength and flapped their wings at the same time, tugging at the chains. Instantly, dozens of chains became extremely taut and tense, creaking loudly. Many cultivators winced at the sight of that. This scene resembled a form of torture in the mortal world where someone was ripped into pieces by 5 horses. However, the 5 horses were now replaced by dozens of Rakshasas. The strength of a single Rakshasa was not comparable to Suzimo. However, there were dozens of Rakshasas exerting strength at the same time. Even nascent souls that specialized in body tempering would be torn apart, let alone Suzimo. "Pest!" Pissed, pissed. Suzimo opened his mouth and started breathing. A terrifying air current surged through his throat and released a sharp wind howl, as though an ancient divine deity was tugging at a gigantic wind box. Break it! Suzimo bellowed loudly. His bones and tendons sounded while his flesh expanded along with the bellow. Right in front of everyone, Suzimo's body, which was initially only 7 foot tall, expanded instantly. In the blink of an eye, he grew to a height of 100 feet and resembled an ancient fiend celestial with a torrential ferocity. Pang! 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 The chains that bound Suzimo's body snapped under the immense burst power. The god race leader's heart skipped a beat and his expression turned grim. The Rakshasa leader's pupils constricted violently. The many cultivators present gasped as they looked up and gazed at the fiend celestial demon king that had just appeared with agape mouths and horrified expressions. What sort of a body was one that was 100 feet tall? Among the cultivators present, the tallest of them were only at the height of Suzimo's toes. Green veins bulged densely on that frighteningly massive body, resembling countless pythons that slithered on its surface. When he broke free from the shackles of the chains, Suzimo was also injured from head to toe due to the spikes. Although he was drenched in blood, he seemed indifferent to it, and fighting spirit blazed in his eyes. He was murderous, resembling a human weapon that was soaked in fresh blood. Bang! Boom! Boom! The sound of thunder rumbling boomed loudly up in the skies. It was as though the awakening of this ancient fiend celestial had shocked the heavens. Lightning flashed and thunder crackled above Suzimo's head, creating electric arcs that split the heavens. A large sea of lightning gathered with a rampant might, as though an apocalypse had arrived. Against that terrifying sight, even the Rakshasa and god race leaders looked somewhat grim and their hearts skipped a beat. This was the true might of heaven and earth. Although their bloodlines were strong, their backgrounds were noble and they inherited many secret skills they had not cultivated to the point where they could challenge heaven and earth. Yet, at that moment, Suzimo's head touched the heavens while his feet touched the earth. His eyes were bright as his black hair danced. There was no hint of fear on his expression. It was as though he was a divine being that ruled over the world. Snap! There was a deafening sound. An incomparably thick thunderbolt descended and struck Suzimo. Crackle! Lightning flashed and spread out in electric arcs. However, Suzimo's aura merely turned increasingly terrifying under the baptism of the frightening thunder. Even thunder could not suppress him. The Purple Thunder Manual. This must be the Purple Thunder Manual. A figure was sprawled at the front of the city among the corpses, hiding his traces warily. When he saw that, he was shocked and could not help but exclaim. However, that person reacted swiftly and shut his mouth hurriedly to avoid attracting any attention from the factions in the city. In truth, everyone in Myriad Phenomenon City were totally drawn to the massive figure that was covered in electricity and demonic chi. There was nobody that would bother to look at the front of the city. Ah! Suzimo roared and his bloodshot, demonic eyes widened. He spread his arms and covered the skies, scooping through the air with his massive palms. Cling! Clang! More than 10 snap chains were collected by Suzimo's hands. On the other end of the chains were Rakshasas that maintained their grip, unable to let go in time. The surging power of thunder traveled along the chains and burst into the bodies of those Rakshasas. Suzimo's flesh and body could withstand the baptism of thunder, but those Rakshasas couldn't. The Rakshasas in midair shuddered and their eyes blanked out as they convulsed uncontrollably. Before they could snap back to their senses, the Rakshasas were no longer in control of their bodies and fell violently, pulled by a tremendous force. Suzimo had swung his arms to smash the chains down fiercely. More than 10 Rakshasas that shone with lightning were smashed onto the stone slabs. Their tendons and bones snapped while their organs were ruptured. Instantly, their consciousnesses disappeared and their lives were severed. That power was way too strong. Coupled with the burst of the power of thunder, the Rakshasas all died on the spot. All of you, die. Suzimo was heated up from the kills and conveniently used the chains as his weapons. His arms danced and thick chains that were filled with lightning tore through the air. The remaining Rakshasas were in chaos as they turned into dark streaks of light that circled around the air. A single chain might have difficulty swatting any of the streaking Rakshasas. However, Zimo wielded more than 10 chains, and they covered almost everything in their path unavoidably. The chains had formed a web made of lightning. Its area was a forbidden place for the Rakshasas. The chains not only possessed the power of thunder, but also the terrifying burst power of Zimo's demon form. They would definitely die if they were struck by the chains. The remaining Rakshasas scattered far away. In fact, they did not even dare to approach him. The mocking, teasing, and condescending looks in their eyes had long vanished. Instead, their eyes were now replaced with shock and fear. On the battlefield, the chains smashed onto the ground loudly. However, it was dead silent behind Zimo. More than 50,000 cultivators reared their heads with agape mouths, as though they had forgotten how to breathe. Their minds were blank and their eyes reflected nothing but that massive, invincible figure. What happened was way too shocking. In Myriad Phenomenon City, every single step taken by this figure shrouded in scarlet demonic chi caused the mountains to quake, and every single roar caused the weather to change. He hurled lightning chains with both arms that ripped through the voids. His chi devoured mountains and rivers, while his skill alarmed heaven and earth. Nobody was his match in the world. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.